My husband surprised me one day by saying he wanted to use the $1 million I inherited to renovate our family home. He said with a grin. I was stunned, barely able to speak. My father had passed away, leaving me the inheritance, but I hadn't told my husband about it. I'd been considering divorcing him because he was too controlling, and I didn't want him knowing about the money since he was always greedy for it. But how did he find out? When I asked him, he confessed to threatening my mother to spill the secret. I couldn't believe his audacity. I fumed as I'd argue with my husband, but he just smirked and said, "Doesn't matter what you think. The deal's done. Your yelling won't change a thing." Now, I'm Caroline, 28 years old, working at a big bank. Always wanted to tie the knot, but my busy job didn't leave much time for dating. So I took a chance and signed up with a matchmaking agency. That's where I met Robert, a cheerful delivery driver a year older than me. In my line of work, I hardly meet any women. Meeting someone like you, Caroline, is like hitting the jackpot, Robert said, blushing. I feel the same way. It's wonderful to hear you say that, I replied. Would you go out with me? With marriage in mind, Robert popped the question. I said yes, and our love story began smoothly. We tied the knot 3 years back. At first, I thought we were a loving pair. I made more money than Robert, but he always praised me, saying, "Caroline, you're amazing, such a career woman." But 3 years into our marriage, Robert's attitude changed. He started with sarcastic jabs like, "Must be nice, earning that big salary." And it wasn't just him. My once friendly in-laws turned cold. They used to be so sweet. "Caroline, working at a major bank is impressive. You must have worked hard. We're thrilled our son married you," they'd say. "Thanks. I'm lucky to have Robert," I'd reply. "We're looking forward to having a great relationship with you," my mother-in-law would say, with a warm smile. At first, both my in-laws seemed so supportive, looking at us with loving eyes. Though issues with mothers-in-law are often talked about, I never thought it would concern me. But soon enough, their true colors showed. "Caroline, you make good money, right? Give us some." I want a designer bag. "It's not a big deal to help us out once in a while," my mother-in-law demanded, as if it were expected. "But I just got you a dress for your birthday recently, and I don't lend or borrow money, even within family," I replied. They were furious when I refused. "How dare you? We only agreed to this marriage because you work at a big bank. Truth is, we can't stand you." "Sick of you always speaking your mind so clearly," my mother-in-law shouted. "Exactly. What's the point of a daughter-in-law who won't give us money? Giving gifts for birthdays is expected. We're telling you to hand over cash. Even after we've asked so many times, you still won't give in." "You're the worst daughter-in-law," my father-in-law scolded, backing up his wife. Robert simply nodded along with his parents' harsh words and didn't stand up for me. To add to that, he often splurged on takeout and expensive furniture without consulting me, saying, "You make good money, so this should be fine." It wouldn't have been a problem if he used his own earnings, but his salary couldn't cover it all, leaving me to foot the bill. With the constant mistreatment from Robert and his parents, divorce started seeming like the only way out. Since we didn't have kids yet, I felt the decision wasn't as complicated, so I began preparing for the divorce. When I brought up the topic to Robert, he'd avoided it and refused to confront the situation. "Divorce? I'm too tired today. I'm going to bed," he'd brush it off. "Wait, Robert. We need to seriously discuss this today," I'd insist. But he'd ignore me and quickly retreat to the bedroom, persistently avoiding the conversation. I got a call from my mom during that time. "Hi, Mom. What's going on? Listen carefully. It's about your dad." According to her, a recent checkup revealed that my father was sick and needed urgent hospitalization. "Got it. I'll head to the hospital right away," I said, rushing to prepare. As I was getting ready to leave, Robert asked where I was going, and I explained about my dad's situation. But he just replied with a nonchalant Disappointed by Robert's lack of concern, especially considering it was about his father-in-law, I focused on going to the hospital without paying him any more mind. When I got there, I joined my mom to hear the doctor's diagnosis. Turns out my dad had cancer, and his time was limited. Both Mom and I were stunned. We debated whether to tell him the truth about his condition, but knowing he'd want to be fully informed, we decided to be honest with him. Returning home devastated, I was met with Robert's insensitive question, "Back from your dad's hospital, huh? How bad is it?" Despite my anger at his tone, I shared the grim news about my father. His response was callous. "Oh, weren't you talking about divorce? If you want to stress out your already ailing father with our divorce, I'm up for it any time." His despicable comment plummeted my feelings for him even lower. But I didn't want to burden my father further. Despite Robert's smug claims about being ready for divorce, whenever we discussed it, he seemed even more pleased. With my workload and a desire to avoid divorce discussions, I focused on being there for my father. Avoiding the topic of divorce seemed like a victory to Robert, worsening his attitude. "So, what about your dad's inheritance? How much are we talking about? I'm his son-in-law, so I should get a share, right?" "Can't wait?" Robert asked eagerly. "That's ridiculous. My dad is still alive. How can you even bring that up?" "Shut up. Don't raise your voice at me." No matter how much I objected, Robert seemed unaffected. His constant speculation about what he might get after my father's passing disgusted me. So, I started staying at my parents' house. I told my mom that I'd be staying there for a while since it was closer to the hospital. After some time, my father passed away after his battle with illness. He left this world peacefully, as if he were asleep. My mom and I cried so much it felt like we'd run out of tears, but with funeral arrangements to be made, we couldn't dwell in our sorrow. I called Robert to inform him about my father's passing and the funeral date. Although I still wanted a divorce, I felt obligated to let him know since we were technically still married. "So, your dad finally passed away. Sorry for your loss. I don't feel like attending the funeral. Too much of a hassle," he said casually. Despite my suspicions, Robert showed no signs of sadness. I had hoped he would at least come to the funeral, but it seemed even that was asking too much. Seeing his indifference, I not only lost any remaining feelings for him, but began to detest him. I regretted marrying a man who concealed such a cruel side. "Do whatever you want," I replied, surprised by my own coldness. "Why are you so upset?" "Oh, and I'm curious about the inheritance," Robert taunted. Unable to bear his mocking laughter, I cut him off and ended the call. In the end, Robert didn't show up for my father's funeral. Some called him heartless, but I believed it was for the best that he stayed away and didn't tarnish my father's final farewell. In truth, I felt relieved he didn't attend. After the funeral, a family meeting was arranged, including my mother and me, to discuss the inheritance. There were talks about who would receive what, but since my father had made decisions before his passing, everything was settled smoothly. Feeling like I had finally found some closure, I decided to head back home. But as soon as Robert saw me, he dropped a bombshell. "Hey, it's been a while. I've decided to use the $1 million you inherited to renovate the family house." "What?" I was so taken aback that my voice faltered. I hadn't discussed the inheritance situation with Robert. How did he know about the $1 million? And why was he planning to spend it on home renovations? Still reeling from the shock, I asked Robert, "What do you mean?" "I have no idea about any large sum of money." With a chuckle, Robert responded, "I had a chat with your mom. I may have nudged her a bit, hinting that if she didn't spill the beans about the inheritance, I might consider divorce. She quickly spilled everything." It turned out that Robert had coerced my mother into revealing details about the inheritance. "You're despicable, threatening my mother like that just to find out." "That's a low blow," I exclaimed, my voice rising without me even realizing it. "I don't care. The renovations are already underway with that $1 million. You did what?" "Yep, lucky me for snagging that cash." "Good thing we're still hitched," Robert retorted smugly. While I was preoccupied with funeral arrangements and other tasks, Robert had already arranged for the renovations using the inheritance. I was speechless. You're obsolete now, but I'm feeling generous. You have two options: move in with my folks or file for divorce. Robert's smirk was downright repulsive. I sighed deeply and replied calmly, I choose divorce, but I won't regret it. Robert laughed dismissively, as if I'd regret anything. With that, he handed me a lawyer's business card. From now on, we'll handle everything through this lawyer. And don't forget to transfer the inheritance to my account, he added. Silently, I packed my belongings and left. Even as I walked out the door, Robert kept reminding me, don't forget about the inheritance. When I recounted everything to my mother, she seemed taken aback. She hadn't realized how strained things were between Robert and me. She also apologized for divulging details about the inheritance to Robert. It's all right, Mom. I should have told you everything. But Robert threatening you is the worst part. I reassured her, then asked if I could stay at our family home until I found a new place. She readily agreed. The following day, my phone buzzed incessantly with calls from Robert, all of which I ignored. Eventually, Robert showed up at my parents' house, ringing the doorbell persistently and causing a commotion. Despite my attempts to ignore him, Robert refused to leave and continued to shout loudly outside. Hey, open the door. I know you're in there. Feeling overwhelmed by his aggressive behavior, my mother suggested, Caroline, maybe you should talk to him to prevent any further disturbance for the neighbors. It might not lead to anything productive, but if things escalate, we'll call the police. All right, I understand, I replied reluctantly. With Robert showing no signs of leaving, I reluctantly opened the door partially, leaving the security chain latched. This is getting out of hand, Caroline. When are you transferring that $1 million? I can't afford the renovations without it, Robert shouted, attempting to shake the door and break the chain. Remaining calm, I responded to Robert. It's under consideration. Confused by my reply, Robert looked puzzled and asked, What do you mean, under consideration? I confronted him with the truth, saying, What I inherited was my father's vacation house. It's not in cash, so I can't transfer it to you. Robert's eyes widened in shock. But then, I had something that surprised me too. How did you manage to secure a $1 million renovation contract? Usually, they wouldn't agree without proof of funds. Well, I have a relative who owns a construction company. I mentioned I'd be receiving $1 million soon, so they skipped the usual checks, Robert explained, looking stunned. If that's the case, remember when I warned you before we decided to divorce? I reminded him. I did warn you properly. You've got to be kidding me. I already paid a deposit of $3,000. I planned to pay the rest in installments, but now I can't. What am I supposed to do? Robert panicked, continuing to fuss. The wife's property is the husband's too, right? Even if it's not in cash. Hand over that $1 million vacation home. We're still married, right? You've got it all wrong, Robert. Inherited property isn't shared, it's solely mine. Not a cent goes to you. And just so we're clear, we're not a couple anymore. We're total strangers, I asserted firmly. Upon hearing this, Robert's expression shifted from despair to rage, his face turning beet red as he began screaming louder than ever. Stop playing games. I'm calling off the divorce. Give me the inheritance right now, he demanded, attempting to grab me through the door gap. Witnessing the altercation, my mother swiftly dialed the police. Robert withdrew his arm upon hearing her on the phone, but then smirked unexpectedly. I'm done with you, he sneered before fleeing the scene. After he left, the police arrived. While the doorbell camera footage seemed to suggest action would be taken, the officers advised me to prioritize my safety and to avoid engaging with Robert in the future, regardless of the circumstances. They instructed me to keep the doors locked and, if necessary, pretend I wasn't home. 3 days later, I received another call from the police regarding the documentation concerning my father's real estate. When I returned to my parents' house after divorcing Robert, I had put the real estate documents in my bag, only to discover they had vanished. Upon being informed that the documents were found, I headed to the police station where Robert was unexpectedly present. To my shock, It turned out that Robert was the thief who stole the documents. As I demanded an explanation, exasperated, Robert wore a sullen expression and muttered, "You thought there might be cash in my bag since I inherited $1 million, right? So when you went through my stuff, you stumbled upon some important-looking documents related to the inheritance and decided to take them." Robert explained that he hadn't examined the documents closely at the time. It was only after learning from me that the $1 million wasn't in cash, but a vacation house that he realized the documents he took were the property title of that house. Later, Robert, assuming that selling the property title would convert the inheritance into cash, took it to a real estate agent, accompanied by my in-laws, to initiate the selling process. However, upon my arrival, the realtor informed me that since the title was still in my father's name, they couldn't proceed with the sale. As the inheritance division discussion had just taken place, I was in the process of finding a notary to transfer the title to my name. Even if the inheritance had been finalized, the property would still be under my name, making it difficult for Robert to sell it without my consent. In frustration, I demanded that they purchase the property since it belonged to my father-in-law. Their response was to call the police on me, likely due to Robert's aggressive behavior, which raised suspicion among the employees. As I stood in shock, Robert began making absurd claims to the police officer. "I was just trying to sell it on her behalf. I didn't steal anything. I haven't done anything wrong. Please let me go," he pleaded, contradicting his earlier admission of taking the documents. Remaining composed, I clarified to the officer, "That's not true. I didn't ask him to sell anything. He stole it on his own. Plus, the documents he took were just copies, not the originals. Even if he tried, he couldn't have sold them." "You set me up. Don't play games with me," Robert shouted furiously, spitting in anger. I responded icily, "What are you even talking about? You stole on your own, and now all you do is spout nonsense. Just face the consequences of your criminal actions." Frustrated, Robert bit his lip, and as a result, he was arrested for theft. With news of Robert's arrest and the loss of the $3,000 deposit broadcasted, my in-laws, now exposed as the parents of a criminal, were compelled to relocate from their town. Later, they seemed to hold a grudge against the real estate agency that reported Robert, resorting to making harassing calls and spreading rumors. The real estate agency, understandably outraged, filed a lawsuit against them for obstructing business and attempted fraud, as they had tried to sell property they didn't own. To avoid a court case, my in-laws had to pay a significant amount in damages. In their desperation, they reached out to me for help. "Caroline, please. We used up our savings for the deposit, and now we're in debt to pay the settlement." My ex-mother-in-law's voice trembled with urgency, but I felt no sympathy. "Why are you asking me for help? I'm divorced from Robert, and as far as I'm concerned, you're strangers to me now." I responded firmly. She pleaded, "You're wealthy, aren't you? Can't you spare some money? We'll pay you back, I promise." "I don't believe that for a second. I'm ending this call. Don't contact me again," I replied coldly, before hanging up and blocking both their numbers. Robert's number had been blocked long ago. Knowing Robert knew where my parents lived, I decided to sell our family home and moved with my mother for safety. As for the $1 million vacation house, I put it back on the market, and it sold without any issues. Now my mother and I live peacefully, cherishing the memories of my father.
Hey, I'm Emily Parker. Life used to be pretty sweet. Mom, Dad, my little brother Jason, and me, the picture-perfect family. Mom's laugh could light up a room, and Dad, well, he was my hero. But everything changed in an instant. It was just a regular Tuesday when Mom collapsed in the kitchen. One moment, she was making her famous lasagna. The next, she was gone. An undiagnosed heart condition, they said, as if giving it a name would somehow make losing her easier. I tried to keep it together for Jason, who was only 15, but I was barely holding on myself. "It's going to be okay, Jace," I tell him, though I didn't believe it. The funeral passed in a blur, my hand gripping his so tightly I was afraid to let go, afraid I'd lose him too. Dad was there, standing stone-faced. I thought he was holding it together for us. But man, Was I wrong? Just 2 weeks after Mom's funeral, Dad brought home someone new. Kids, I'd like you to meet someone special, he said, as if introducing the new pet, not a whole person. Special? Really? Mom's grave wasn't even cold yet. Emily, don't be dramatic. Life goes on, he said, cool as ever. Life goes on. Is that what he told himself when he was out meeting Veronica at the wake? When she tried to step in, calling me sweetie, I snapped. Don't call me sweetie, I said, and how dare you bring her into Mom's house? Dad's face flushed red. That's enough. You will not disrespect me or Veronica in this house. Disrespect. Disrespecting Mom's memory was what he was doing. Then suddenly I was falling. I didn't even see it coming. 1 second, I was standing at the top of the stairs. The next, I was tumbling down, the world spinning. Pain exploded in my arm and head as I hit the bottom. Through the haze, I heard Veronica's shrill voice. Robert, what have you done? Everything after that was a blur. Hospital lights, a concussion, a broken arm, Dad's flimsy excuse about how I lost my balance. Right. Later, that night, lying in bed with my arm throbbing, I overheard them talking in the hallway. We need to speed things up, Robert, Veronica was saying. The sooner we're married, the sooner we can handle Emily's situation. My blood went cold. Handle me? This wasn't happening. My dad, the man who taught me to ride a bike and cried at my graduation, was plotting against me with this woman. In that moment, something inside me hardened. If they thought they could push me aside that easily, they had another thing coming. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Now, 3 months in at my friend Zoo's place, I still wake up in cold sweats. The nightmares are always the same, falling, and Dad's face at the top of the stairs, cold and unrecognizable. You okay? Zoo's voice filters through the thin walls of our cramped apartment. Just peachy, I call back, rubbing my still aching arm. The cast might be off, but the pain lingers, a constant reminder. In the kitchen, Zoe slides a mug of coffee my way. You know, you could always ask your dad for help with rent, she says. I snort. Yeah, and I could ask a shark for swimming lessons. No thanks. Later, sorting through Mom's old papers, I find myself wondering how much longer I can keep going like this. But one thing's for sure. I'm not giving up and I'm not going back. As I'm sorting through Mom's old papers, something catches my eye. Her medical records don't add up. My mind races and I call Marcus, our law student friend. Hey Marcus, can you come over? Bring those legal eagle eyes of yours. Something's off about Mom's death certificate. An hour later, we're sprawled out on Zoo's living room floor, papers everywhere. Marcus points to a section. Look at this, he says. Your mom's prescription dosage changed drastically a week before she died. Zoe peers over his shoulder. Could it be a mistake? I shake my head. Mom was meticulous about her meds. This doesn't make any sense. We keep digging, poring over bank statements and old emails. The more we pull, the more the threads start unraveling. Oh my God, Zoe whispers, staring at her laptop. You need to see this. She turns the screen to show me an old company newsletter. There's Dad, his arm around a familiar blonde. The caption reads, Robert Parker and his secretary Veronica Mills celebrate another record quarter. My stomach twists. They knew each other before Mom died. Marcus frowns, holding up another document. Emily, these bank transfers, they're not normal. Large sums were going to an offshore account starting months before your mom passed. The pieces start falling into place, forming a picture I don't want to see. Dad and Veronica, an affair, money disappearing, Mom's sudden death. I need to talk to Jason, I say, grabbing my phone. An hour later, I'm across from my little brother in a dingy diner. He looks tired, older than his 15 years. Jace, I need you to be honest with me. Have you noticed anything weird at home? He fidgets with his napkin. Define weird. Dad and Veronica. The way they act. Anything strange about the night Mom died? Jason goes pale. I wasn't supposed to say anything. Jason, please. If you know something. He takes a shaky breath. The night before Mom died, I heard them fighting. Dad and Veronica. They didn't know I was home. My heart races. What were they saying? Something about Mom's pills. Veronica was mad, saying it was too risky. Dad said they had no choice, that Mom was going to ruin everything. The world tilts. I grip the table to steady myself. Emily. Jason's voice sounds far away, confused. How do I tell him that our father might be a murderer? I don't know yet, Jace, I say, reaching for his hand. But I promise I'm going to find out. I'm going to make this right. The next few weeks are a blur of late nights, coffee, and piecing together a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Zoe, Marcus, and I form a makeshift detective team, the walls of our living room covered in sticky notes and string like some crime show. One night, Marcus pulls me aside. Emily, look at this, he says, voice tight. He's hunched over his laptop, scrolling through financial records. Your dad's been siphoning money from his company for years. We're talking millions. Zoe lets out a low whistle. Guess that explains the beach house. I feel sick. Why would Dad risk everything? Greed? Marcus shrugs. Or maybe he needed to keep Veronica happy. The more we dig, the worse it gets. Offshore accounts, fake charities, a web of lies so complex it makes my head spin. And then the final piece falls into place. It's an email from Mom to her lawyer, dated just days before she died. My hands shake as I read it aloud. I've discovered Robert's affair and the extent of his embezzlement. I plan to confront him tomorrow and file for divorce. If anything happens to me, I can't finish. Zoe wraps her arms around me as I break down. Marcus says gently, we need to consider the possibility that your dad killed her. I choke out, oh God, he killed her. The next day, we're sorting through Mom's old medical records when my phone buzzes. It's Dad. I hesitate before answering. Emily, we need to talk, he says, his voice cold, unrecognizable. We agree to meet at a cafe near his office. As soon as I sit down, he cuts straight to it. Whatever you think you're doing, it needs to stop. I swallow, keeping my voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. He leans in, his eyes hard. Don't play dumb. I know you've been digging around, asking questions. It stops now, or there will be consequences. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. Keep this up and Jason's college fund disappears. And maybe I'll have to mention your mental health issues. Grief can do funny things to the mind after all. I feel like I've been slapped. You wouldn't dare. Try me. He stands, smirking. Be smart, Emily. For once in your life. As he walks away, I spot Veronica waiting by his car, fidgeting nervously. Our eyes meet for a moment, and I see it. Fear, guilt. That night, I lie awake, replaying Dad's threats, Mom's face, imagining her last moments. By morning, I've made a decision. I'm going to the board, I tell Zoe and Marcus over breakfast. Zoe nearly chokes on her toast. Are you sure? That's a big step. I nod. It's time. We have enough evidence. They need to know who's really running their company. Marcus looks at me, worry etched across his face. Emily, this could backfire. Your dad's powerful. He could make your life hell. He already has, I reply, my voice steady and hard. I'm done being scared, done letting him win. I spend the next hour on the phone, finally reaching the board secretary. I need to speak with the board immediately. I tell her, my heart pounding. It's about Robert Parker, and it can't wait. As I hang up, a strange mix of terror and determination settles over me. This is it, the point of no return. Whatever happens next, there's no going back. But as I think of Mom, of Jason, and of everything we've lost, I know this is the right choice. The next day, I turn to Zoe and Marcus. The meeting's set for tomorrow. Let's get ready to blow this whole thing wide open. My hands are shaking as we walk into the boardroom. Zoe squeezes my arm, and Marcus gives me a reassuring nod. The board members stare at us with expressions of curiosity and impatience. Miss Parker, the chairman says, you have our attention. What is this about? Take a deep breath and begin, laying everything out. The embezzlement, the affair, the suspicious circumstances surrounding Mom's death. With each revelation, the tension in the room deepens. These bank statements clearly show the money trail, Marcus explains, pointing to a slide. One board member leans forward, frowning. Are you suggesting Mr. Parker killed his wife? We're presenting evidence of financial crimes and a pattern of deception, I say carefully. My mother's death occurred under highly suspicious circumstances. By the time we finish, the room is in an uproar. The chairman stands, his face grim. Miss Parker, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Robert Parker will be suspended immediately, and we'll launch a full investigation. As we leave, my phone explodes with notifications. The story's breaking, with Dad's face plastered across news sites. The words fraud and scandal are everywhere. In the days that follow, it's like watching a house of cards collapse. Dad's friends turn their backs, his country club membership is revoked, and even Veronica bails, fleeing to her sister's place in Florida. Jason calls me, his voice shaky. Can I come stay with you? I can't be in this house anymore. Of course, Jace. I'm coming to get you right now. When the police get involved, they dig deeper than we ever could. They can't prove Dad murdered Mom, but the evidence of financial crimes is overwhelming. I watch from Zoo's apartment as they lead him away in handcuffs, his face ashen. Months pass, and I pour myself into writing, transforming our ordeal into a book. It's painful to relive it all, but it's also cathartic. I start speaking at support groups for survivors of abuse and fraud, slowly rebuilding my life. Then, on a crisp fall morning, I get the call. Dad has been sentenced to 15 years, and Veronica's facing charges too. It's finally over. That night, Jason, Zoe, Marcus, and I sit on the roof of our building, city lights twinkling below us, filling us with hope. To Mom, Jason says, raising his soda can. To justice, adds Marcus. To new beginnings, chimes Zoe. I look around at them, my true family, and feel warmth like I haven't felt in years. To healing, I say softly. As we sit there, I think about the long road ahead. The scars are deep and they'll always be a part of me. But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of the future. I'm ready for it. I look up at the stars, imagining Mom smiling down on us. We did it, I whisper. We made it right. Tomorrow, I'll wake up and keep rebuilding, keep writing, keep speaking out. But tonight, surrounded by love and free from the shadows of betrayal, I allow myself simply to be. The wounds of the past are healing, making way for a future brighter than I ever dared to imagine. Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda. How do you plan to handle college while working 2 jobs? Be realistic. Rick's words stung as I arranged the appetizers at Reynolds Corp's holiday party. I was just a caterer back then, dreaming of something bigger. The customers are waiting, he added with a condescending gaze. I forced a smile, dodging his stare, not knowing then that this smug middle manager would one day become my husband and my biggest mistake. You're different from other waitresses, he said later that evening, turning on the charm. Let me take you to dinner sometime. That's how it started. Rick Cooper swept me off my feet with expensive dates and promises of a better life. 6 months later, we were married. Brenda, darling, you don't need to work those demeaning jobs anymore. My new mother-in-law, Diana, cooed at our wedding reception. A Cooper woman has certain standards to maintain. But I had my own dreams. I'm still planning to finish my business degree, I told Rick one evening. Oh, honey, why waste time on that? You've got me now, he laughed, pulling me close. I make 6 figures, just focus on being my wife. My best friend, Amanda, was the first to see through him. Over coffee one morning she warned me, Brenda, he's trying to control you. This isn't love. He just wants what's best for me, I defended. But doubt was creeping in. The transformation was gradual. First, Rick forgot to give me gas money. Then he started questioning every purchase. My part-time college classes became a constant target. Another B-, maybe this just isn't for you, babe, he mocked, his words cutting deep. Stick to what you're good at, making my dinner. I began hiding my textbooks, studying in secret while he worked late. Amanda helped me set up a hidden bank account. Your wife is still playing student, huh? I overheard Kevin, Rick's colleague, say one day, but there was something in Kevin's voice, a hint of concern. Maybe he didn't agree with Rick's sneer. Mrs. Cooper, Patricia from HR, found me crying in the restroom during another company event. If you ever need to talk. That evening, Diana dropped by unannounced. Darling, I heard you're still taking classes. Some women just aren't meant for the corporate world. Rick needs a proper wife. I can be both, I insisted. Can you? Look at yourself. Bargain store clothes, student loans. Thank goodness Rick doesn't mind supporting such modest beginnings. I forced a smile, thinking of my hidden Dean's List certificate. She had no idea. Watching Rick boast about his promotion that night, I made a silent bow. One day, they'd all see what this waitress was truly capable of. But first, I had to survive being Mrs. Cooper. And the worst was yet to come. Brenda, stop embarrassing me. Rick's voice boomed across the ballroom at the Reynolds Corp event. I dared to share my thoughts on market expansion with a board member. My wife thinks her community college classes make her a business expert, he sneered, tightening his grip on my arm. The room fell silent, and Marcus Reynolds himself raised an eyebrow. Actually, I just completed my MBA with honors at. Why don't you get us some drinks, honey? He cut me off. Later that night, Amanda called. You won't believe what I just heard. Rick's been seeing Melissa Brighton, the investor's daughter. My hands shook. I have proof, Amanda continued. Kevin sent me photos. He's worried about you. The next day, diploma in hand, I walked into Patricia's office. I need to report workplace harassment. Finally, she sighed, pulling out a thick file. I've been documenting his behavior for months. The sexist comments, the undermining. Mrs. Cooper, I mean Brenda. Kevin met me in the parking lot. There's something else you should know. Rick's been doctoring expense reports. At lunch with Amanda, I knew what I had to do. I want a divorce. Already working on it, she replied, sliding a folder across the table. And I've got your resume ready. A consulting firm is looking for fresh talent. That evening, I packed my essentials while Rick worked late. The next morning, I heard Diana's voice screeching through the door of my apartment. What do you mean she's gone? Richard, fix this. A Cooper doesn't get divorced. But I was done fixing things. My interview at Summit Consulting was a revelation. Impressive analysis, the VB nodded, clearly pleased. When can you start? Meanwhile, Rick's texts had turned from angry to desperate. Babe, let's talk. You're nothing without me. Delete. At Reynolds, things were unraveling. You've got another harassment complaint, Patricia informed Rick in a meeting I heard about later. The board is concerned. My first project at Summit was to revamp a failing tech division. When the CEO personally congratulated me, it felt surreal. Your wife is making quite a name for herself, Kevin later told Rick. Ex-wife, I corrected, walking past their office with my new team in tow. Diana cornered me at Starbucks. You ungrateful little gold digger, after everything we gave you. You gave me motivation, I replied with a smile, sipping my latte. Thanks for that. The divorce papers arrived the same day as my first executive bonus. As I signed them, an email popped up, an invitation to interview for a director position. Rick sent one last email, too. I heard about your promotion. Maybe I was wrong about you. Can we talk? I clicked delete. From my new office, I had a view of the city, a team that respected me, and a voice that was finally heard. Breaking point? No, this was just the beginning. Later, Amanda raised her glass. To karma. To new beginnings, I corrected, but I had no idea just how new things were about to get. Let me get this straight, Marcus Reynolds leaned back in his chair during our interview. You completely transformed Summit's tech division in months. The numbers speak for themselves, I replied, sliding my portfolio across the desk. Interviewing at Reynolds Corp now, as a potential VP, felt like poetic justice. Very impressive, especially your overseas expansion strategy. A knock interrupted us. Rick burst in, freezing when he saw me. Cooper, we're in a meeting, Marcus frowned. I didn't know you were interviewing her. Your ex-wife's reputation precedes her. That'll be all. Outside, I heard Rick hissing into his phone. Mother, she's trying to get a VP position here. Do something. In the elevator, Kevin caught up with me. Watch your back, he warned. Rick's been meeting with competitors, sharing insider information. He handed me a USB, been collecting it for months. Patricia joined us. He's also been taking credit for his team's work. 3 complaints just this quarter. My phone buzzed with another message from Rick. Back off from Reynolds Corp or else. I finally replied, or else what? You think you're so smart? I made you. I can break you. I forwarded his threat to Patricia. At the next board meeting, Rick presented his innovative strategy. Interesting approach, Marcus nodded. Miss Mitchell, your thoughts? That's word for word my proposal from Summit last year. I have the copyright documentation. Rick's face went white. Later, Marcus called me into his office. I'm retiring next month. The board needs someone who can spot theft and manipulation a mile away. Are you sane? We want you as CEO, he confirmed. Though your ex-husband might have an issue with that. Rick's issues stopped being my concern 2 years ago. The next day, Diana stormed into my new office. You conniving little witch. First you humiliate our family, and now this. Security, I pressed my intercom. Please escort Mrs. Cooper out. This isn't over, she screeched. Actually, it is. Kevin appeared with more files. Rick's been embezzling company funds for years. The evidence is irrefutable. The board meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. Rick had no idea his career at Reynolds Corp was about to end. He thought he'd broken me when I was serving appetizers at company parties. But instead, he'd given me an up-close view of everything that needed to change. My phone buzzed one last time. Brenda, please, we need to talk. I know I made mistakes. I switched off my phone and reviewed the termination papers on my desk. Tomorrow would be interesting. Ladies and gentlemen of the board. Marcus's voice echoed through the boardroom. Please welcome your new CEO, Brenda Mitchell. This is ridiculous. Rick shot up from his seat. She was a waitress. She served us drinks in this very room, and now she's supposed to be CEO. She'll be serving you your termination papers. Marcus replied coolly. Security, please stay close. I took my place at the head of the table. As my first act as CEO, I'm announcing a full audit of all financial activities from the past 5 years. Rick's face turned ashen. You can't do this, he whispered. Oh really? Watch me. Kevin stepped forward, laying out documents. We've uncovered systematic embezzlement through falsified expense reports and josed vendor accounts, all leading back to you, Mr. Cooper. Patricia added, 3 more complaints filed just this quarter. At that moment, Diana burst through the doors. This is a conspiracy. My Richard would never. Mrs. Cooper, I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. This is a closed board meeting. Please exit before security removes you. You little peasant. After everything. 2 security guards stepped forward, escorting her out. Brenda, Rick's voice cracked. Baby, please, we can work this out. Remember how good we were together. I'm sorry about everything. I held up a hand. Save it. 2 detectives entered, their presence casting a hush over the room. Richard Cooper, one of them announced, you're under investigation for corporate fraud and embezzlement. Later that afternoon, I sat in my office, the CEO's office, signing a new set of documents. Your termination papers, Mr. Cooper. I slid them across the desk. Unless you prefer to resign. You've ruined me, he muttered, unable to meet my eyes. No, Rick, you ruined yourself. Your arrogance, your theft, your abuse, it all caught up with you. I'm just the messenger. You wouldn't be anything without me. I made you who you are. I let a small smile escape. You did. You made me stronger. I'll give you that. Now get out of my office. As he slunk away, Kevin entered with yet another file in hand. The audit team found something else. Diana's been involved in real estate fraud using company funds. I didn't hesitate. Forward everything to the authorities. From my office window, I watched as Rick was escorted out, carrying a box of his belongings, his expression hollow. In the parking lot, Diana was visibly breaking down as reporters surrounded her. Later that evening, I called an all-hands meeting. Changes are coming to Reynolds Corp, I began. We're implementing full transparency, merit-based promotions, and a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. The Old Boys Club is officially closed. Patricia's grin was infectious, and I saw a wave of relief cross Kevin's face. The next morning's headlines read, Reynolds Corp names new CEO. From waitress to corporate chief. Right next to it, former executive faces federal charges, and prominent realtor under investigation. My phone buzzed one last time. Rick again. I still love you. Please help me. Delete. Some people call it revenge. I call it justice. So, what would you do if your ex tried to apologize and beg for help after years of mocking and manipulating you? Would you show mercy, or would you do exactly what I did and press delete? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Hey everyone, I'm Natalie Chen. I'll never forget the day I found out I was pregnant. I was alone in the bathroom, staring at that little stick, and my heart was racing. When those 2 pink lines appeared, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I've always been so focused on my career as a graphic designer. But this was a whole new adventure. The first person I wanted to tell was my husband, Daniel. He was in the garage, totally absorbed in his latest art project. I burst in, waving the test like a crazy person. Danny, I shouted. He looked up, saw the test, and his eyes went wide. Before I knew it, we were both laughing and crying and hugging in the middle of his tools and paintbrushes. We were going to be parents. We decided to tell our friends at Friday our weekly game night. So, my best friend since college shrieked so loud I thought the neighbors would call the cops. "I'm going to be an aunt," she shouted, practically crushing me in a hug. Marcus, my work buddy, just grinned. "Congrats, Nat. That kid's going to have the coolest nursery in town." It felt like everything was falling into place. Daniel and I spent evenings planning the nursery, picking out baby names, and daydreaming about our future as a family. But then, life threw us a curveball. On a regular Tuesday, Daniel got a call that his dad, Richard, had a minor heart attack. Daniel looked shaken. "He's okay," he assured me, "but the doctor said he shouldn't be alone for a while." I didn't hesitate. "He can stay with us," I said. "I mean, he's family, right?" Richard moved in a week later. At first, it was nice. He helped around the house and even took over some of the cooking. But then the little comments started. "Should you be eating that?" he'd ask, looking suspiciously at my plate. Or, "Are you sure you should be working so late?" At first, I brushed it off. He was just worried, I told myself. Then one evening, as I was heading out to meet a client, Richard stopped me. "You know," he began, "when my wife was pregnant, she focused on taking care of herself and the baby." I felt like I'd been slapped. "I am taking care of myself," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Daniel quickly jumped in, trying to calm things down. "Then Nat's doing great. The doctor says everything is fine." But Richard just shook his head. "Times have changed, I suppose," he muttered. After that, the tension in the house was constant. I'd catch Richard watching me with this look of disapproval whenever I worked late or snacked. His sighs and muttered comments became the backdrop to my days. One afternoon, I overheard him talking to Daniel in the kitchen. "Son, I'm worried about Natalie. Is she really ready for this? A baby is a big responsibility." I felt a pang of doubt. Was he right? Was I doing something wrong? That night, I called Zoe in tears. "Am I being oversensitive?" I asked. "Hell no," she said firmly. "He's being a jerk. You're growing a human, Nat. You're amazing." Her words helped, but the damage was done. The home that was once our sanctuary had become a minefield. And it only got worse. As my belly grew, so did Richard's comments. One morning, as I rushed to get ready for work, he cornered me in the kitchen. When my wife was pregnant, she took time off work to prepare for the baby. I took a deep breath. "Well, Richard, times have changed," I said. "I love my job and I'm perfectly capable of working and being pregnant." He scoffed. "And what about after the baby comes? You'll be a burden on Daniel, mark my words." His words cut deep, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt. I grabbed my bag and called over my shoulder, "Daniel and I are a team. We'll manage just fine." At work, I threw myself into a big project. Marcus, always perceptive, pulled me aside. "Hey, Nat, you seem stressed. Everything okay?" I hesitated. Then it all came pouring out. "It's Richard. He keeps saying I'm not ready to be a mom, that I'm a burden on Daniel. I don't know what to do." Marcus's face darkened. "That's not okay, Nat. Have you talked to Daniel about this?" I shook my head. I don't want to put him in the middle. It's his dad, you know. Marcus looked at me seriously. "Yeah, but you're his wife and you're carrying his child. He needs to know what's going on." I nodded, realizing Marcus was right. That evening, I decided to talk to Daniel. Richard always seemed to hover close, making it nearly impossible to find a moment alone with Daniel. Finally, on Saturday afternoon, I got my chance. Daniel and I were relaxing in the living room when Richard stormed in, waving the dust cloth. "Natalie, when was the last time you cleaned? This place is a pigsty." I felt my cheeks flush with anger. "I've been busy with work, Richard, and I haven't been feeling great," I said, my voice tense. He snorted, crossing his arms. "Oh please, you're always not feeling great. I'm starting to think you're faking these symptoms just to get out of housework." That was it. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Faking? Are you kidding me? I'm growing a human, Richard. I'm tired, I'm nauseous, and I'm doing my best to keep up with everything. What's your excuse for being so unpleasant?" Richard's face turned red with anger. "How dare you speak to me like that? Daniel, are you going to let her talk to me this way?" I turned to Daniel, bracing for him to try and placate his father as usual. But to my surprise, he held his ground, his jaw set and eyes unwavering. "Dad, that's enough. Natalie isn't faking anything. She's pregnant, and she's working hard. You need to back off." Richard sputtered, clearly taken aback. "I'm just trying to help, son. You'll see, she's not cut out for this. She's going to drag you down." I felt tears stinging my eyes, and Daniel stepped protectively between us, his voice firm. Dad, I think you should go to your room. We'll talk about this later. Richard stormed off, fuming, and as soon as he was gone, Daniel pulled me into a hug. I'm so sorry, Nat. I had no idea it was this bad. Why didn't you tell me? I buried my face in his chest, letting the tears finally fall. I didn't want to cause problems between you and your dad. I thought I could handle it. He stroked my hair gently. You don't have to handle this alone. We're in this together, remember? In his arms, I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders, as if things might finally be okay. But a nagging thought tugged at me, wondering how long this peace would really last, and what it would take to end Richard's toxic behavior for good. The next morning, I woke up to raised voices coming from the kitchen. I crept down the stairs, staying out of sight as I listened to Daniel confronting his father. Dad, we need to talk about how you've been treating Natalie, Daniel said, his voice steady. Treating her? I'm looking out for you, son, Richard snapped. By insulting my wife? By making her feel unwelcome in our home. There was a pause, and then Richard's voice dropped to a cold mutter. That woman has ruined everything. You were supposed to take over the family business, not waste your time on art. My breath caught. Was this what all the bitterness was about? Natalie didn't make that decision, Dad. I did. I never wanted to join the business, and you know it. She filled your head with nonsense about following your passion. Richard scoffed. Because she supports me, unlike you, who's only ever cared about what you want. The argument continued, but I'd heard enough. I slipped back upstairs, my mind spinning. Later that day, I met Zoe for coffee, needing someone to talk to. I started to tell her what I'd overheard, but her expression stopped me cold. What's wrong? I asked. She hesitated. Nat, there's something you should know. Richard's been talking about you. A chill settled over me. What do you mean? Zoe looked at me apologetically. He's been telling people that you're unstable, that you're not fit to be a mother. He even suggested that you might hurt the baby. I felt like I'd been punched. He? What? I'm so sorry, Nat. I shut him down as soon as I heard, but I pulled away, my shock morphing into fury. This ends now. On the way home, I called Marcus, my voice shaking with anger. I need your help, I said, explaining everything. Jesus, Nat, that's messed up. What do you need? You've got connections in the business world, right? I need you to dig into Richard's past. There's got to be a reason he's so bitter about Daniel not joining the family business. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure about this? Absolutely. He's trying to destroy my reputation. I need to know what we're dealing with. Over the next week, Marcus and I worked together, piecing together Richard's hidden history. The truth we uncovered left us both stunned. Nat, you're not going to believe this, Marcus said one evening. Richard's company. It's built on fraud. He's been cooking the books for years, embezzling from investors. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with disgust. No wonder he wanted Daniel to take over. He needed someone he could control to keep his secrets. Armed with this information, I went to Daniel. His face turned pale as I laid everything out. I can't believe this, he murmured. I took his hand, squeezing it tightly. I'm sorry, Dan. I know this must be hard to hear. He set his jaw, determination sparking in his eyes. No, I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner, for not protecting you. But that ends now. That evening, Daniel and I stood side by side in the living room, facing Richard. My heart pounded, but with Daniel beside me, I felt strong. Dad, we need to talk, Daniel began, his voice steady. Richard looked up from his newspaper, irritation etched on his face. I stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the coffee table. We know about the fraud, Richard. The embezzlement, the cooked books, everything. His face went pale before quickly turning red with fury. You've been snooping into my business. How dare you? Daniel stepped in, his voice unyielding. No, Dad. How dare you? You've lied, cheated, and tried to manipulate me into continuing your illegal practices. Richard's face twisted with anger, but he tried to justify himself. It was for your future, for this family's legacy. I couldn't stay silent any longer. Family legacy. You've been tearing this family apart since you arrived. Daniel placed a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Here's the deal, Dad. You have two choices. You leave our home today and get professional help, or we take this evidence to the authorities. Richard's face contorted, his eyes burning with resentment. Ungrateful brats, after everything I've done for you, for us. I scoffed. You mean like spreading lies about me? trying to convince everyone I'm an unfit mother. For a moment, he looked stunned. Then his expression hardened, full of bitterness. You ruined everything. You turned my own son against me, against his future. Daniel shook his head, disappointment heavy in his voice. No, Dad, you did that all on your own. Richard abruptly stood, knocking over his chair. Fine, you won't be gone. I'm gone. But mark my words, you'll regret this, both of you. He stormed upstairs, his footsteps echoing through the house. An hour later, he was gone, leaving behind a tense silence. The months that followed were hard but healing. Daniel started therapy, working through the years of manipulation and control. We focused on preparing for our baby, surrounding ourselves with supportive friends like Zoe and Marcus. Then, on a warm summer day, our daughter Lily was born, perfect and beautiful. As I held her with Daniel by my side, a wave of peace washed over me. She's amazing, Daniel whispered, gently stroking Lily's cheek. Later, Zoe and Marcus visited, bearing gifts and warm smiles. As we shared stories and admired the baby, Marcus's phone buzzed. You guys might want to see this, he said, showing us a news article. Richard had been arrested for tax evasion, the charges completely unrelated to what we'd uncovered. Daniel exhaled, a mix of relief and disbelief. I guess karma's real, after all. That night, as our friends left and we settled into our first quiet evening as a family of 3, I looked at Daniel. We made it. After all that, we can handle anything, right? He wrapped his arms around me and Lily, smiling. Absolutely, and we'll do it together, always. Looking down at our daughter, I felt a fierce determination. We fought hard to protect her future, a future built on love, support, and honesty. And for that, I'd go through it all again. If you were in my shoes, would you have exposed Richard's fraudulent business practices or kept quiet to maintain family peace? What would you have done differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
Hey there, I'm Mia, 28, and currently stuck living with my in-laws. My husband John is working overseas, busting his ass to support us. Sounds like a cushy setup, right? Think again. Welcome to my personal hell. It's another day of scraping by. I'm in the kitchen trying to turn practically nothing into breakfast. Linda, do we have any eggs left? I call out to my mother-in-law. I don't think so, dear, she replies, voice barely above a whisper. Robert hasn't given me money for groceries yet. Later, I'm outside hanging laundry when my neighbor Sandra leans over the fence. Hey Mia, you okay? You're looking pretty stressed. I force a smile. Just the usual, trying to stretch $1 into 100. Sandra frowns. But doesn't John send you guys money? He's making good money overseas, isn't he? Yeah, he does, but I'm cut off by the sound of my phone. It's John, I answer, trying to keep my tone cheerful. Hey babe. Mia, what's going on? I just sent over $5,000 last week, and you're already asking for more. Where's all the money going? I freeze, my mind racing. $5,000? I've seen maybe $100 tops. John, I don't know what you're talking about. We're barely scraping by here. That's impossible. Dad's handling the finances. He wouldn't. He sighs. Look, I've got to go. We'll talk later. As I hang up, a chill runs through me. Something's very wrong, and I'm starting to realize just how deep this rabbit hole goes. But one thing's for sure, I'm going to get to the bottom of it, no matter what it takes. After that call, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off. $5,000. Where was all that money going? That night, while Robert was passed out drunk and Linda was glued to her soaps, I snuck into their bedroom. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it would burst. I rifled through the drawers, looking for any hint about our finances. Bingo! I found a stack of bank statements hidden in a false bottom drawer of Robert's desk. My hands shook as I flipped through them. The numbers didn't lie. Robert had been pocketing most of John's money for months. The next day, I confronted Linda. You knew, didn't you? I hissed, thrusting the statements in her face. She burst into tears. I'm so sorry, Mia. Robert, he has a gambling problem. He said he'd stop, but she trailed off, face crumpling. He threatened to leave me if I told anyone. I was scared. My anger simmered, but I softened just a little. Where does he gamble? There's this underground casino. He goes almost every night. That night, I followed Robert. Sure enough, he headed straight to a seedy building downtown. Through the window, I watched him blow through thousands in minutes.
Back home, I dug deeper, finding a stash of checks from John, all cashed by Robert. The bastard had even been intercepting our mail. I was seeing red. I stormed into the living room where Robert was slouched in front of the TV. "You thieving!" I screamed, hurling the evidence at him. Robert's face twisted from shock to rage in an instant. "Listen here, you ungrateful little fool," he snarled. "You breathe a word of this to Sean, and I'll make sure he never believes you. Who do you think he'll trust? His loving father or his gold-digging wife? Try me, old man. Your days of leeching off us are over." I ran to my room, slamming the door and locking it. My hands shook as I dialed John. "Babe, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "John, listen to me. Your father's been stealing the money you've been sending. He's gambling it all away." There was a long silence. "Ma, that's a serious accusation. Are you sure?" My heart sank. He didn't believe me. "John, I have proof. Bank statements, cash checks." "Whoa, slow down. I'm sure there's just been some misunderstanding. Dad wouldn't." "John, please, you have to trust me," I pleaded. But suddenly, a loud bang rattled my door. Robert's voice boomed from the hallway. "Open this door, you little snake. I'll teach you to go behind my back." "Mia, what's going on?" Joan's voice crackled through the phone. "I have to go, John. Just be careful who you trust. I love you." I hung up, my mind racing as Robert continued pounding on the door, splintering the wood. I was trapped, alone with a raging, drunken thief on the other side. But one thing was clear, this was war and I wasn't about to go down without a fight. The next morning, I woke up with a fire in my gut. Robert might think he'd scared me into submission, but he had no idea who he was messing with. I texted Sandra, who showed up right away. We spent hours plotting, fueled by coffee and simmering rage. By sunset, we had a plan that would make Ocean's 11 look like child's play. Step 1. Get Sean on board. I called him, keeping my voice steady. "Babe, I know you're struggling to believe me, but I'm begging you, send the next payment to a new account. One that only I can access." There was a long pause. "Okay, Mia, I trust you." Relief washed over me. Now came the hard part. Later, I cornered Robert in the kitchen. "I'm sorry about last night," I murmured, forcing a hint of shame into my tone. I was stressed and jumped to conclusions. "It won't happen again." Robert narrowed his eyes, then gave a curt nod. "See that it doesn't." Over the next few weeks, I played the perfect daughter-in-law. I cooked Robert's favorite meals, laughed at his awful jokes, and never mentioned money. Meanwhile, I was gathering evidence. I planted hidden cameras to catch him counting stolen cash, recorded his shady calls to bookies on a burner phone, and even managed to swipe his old tax returns, proving years of fraud. Then, out of the blue, John's cousin Tom showed up. "Surprise visit," he said with a grin. But I caught the glint in his eye. John had sent backup. That night, Tom and I huddled in my room, whispering. "I've got an idea," he said, his voice low. "But it's risky." The plan was brilliant. Dangerous, but brilliant. The next day, I burst into the house, waving a lottery ticket. "Oh my God, I won! I freaking won!" I screamed. Robert's eyes lit up, his gaze like a shark catching the scent of blood. "Won what, dear?" "The lottery. One of those scratch-offs. $5 million. I watched the dollar signs practically sparkle in his eyes. That's wonderful, Mia. We should celebrate." Over the next few days, Robert was sickeningly sweet. He offered to help me claim the winnings, invest the money wisely. I played along, pretending to consider his offers. Finally, the big day arrived. Tom had mocked up fake lottery paperwork, and I made a big show of signing it at the kitchen table. "You know," Robert said, his voice dripping with insincerity, "as head of the household, I think it's best if I hold on to that ticket for safekeeping." I hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I guess that makes sense." The moment Robert's hand touched the paper, the front door burst open. John stormed in, his face a mask of fury. Behind him was a man in a suit, a real lawyer Tom had convinced to play along. "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" John roared. Robert stammered, caught red-handed. I was just what? Stealing from Maya like you've been stealing from me." The lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, we have evidence of your fraudulent activities, spanning years. I suggest you come with us quietly." Robert's face went pale. In a last desperate move, he lunged for the back door. But Tom was there, blocking Robert's escape. As the officer led a cursing, struggling Robert away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. John pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you at first." "It's okay," I murmured. "It's over now." But as I watched Robert being driven away, I knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge, rebuilding our lives and our trust, was still to come. The next few days were a whirlwind. With Robert gone, the house felt like a powder keg ready to explode. John was shell-shocked, Linda was a wreck, and I found myself in the middle, trying to hold everything together. Then one afternoon, Doe's phone rang. It was the police station. Robert's gambling debts had finally caught up with him, and he owed some dangerous people more than just money. "He's going away for a long time," Don said, hanging up. He looked at me, his eyes full of regret. "Maya, I can't believe what you went through. I should have listened to you sooner." I shook my head. "What matters is that you know the truth now." In the weeks that followed, we faced the harsh reality of Robert's mess. The house was mortgaged to the hilt, bank accounts were drained, and debt collectors were circling. It was like waking from a nightmare only to find the monsters were still real. In the end, we packed up what little we had and said goodbye to Linda, who was going to stay with her sister to start rebuilding her own life. As for Sean and me, we hit the road, seeking a fresh start. 6 months later, life looked entirely different. John found a job stateside, and I finally started my own small business, something I dreamed of but never had the confidence to pursue. Our new apartment was small, but it was ours. No more walking on eggshells, no more lies. Just us, building the life we deserved. We'd occasionally hear news about Robert. He was serving time, and from what we heard, he wasn't doing well. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a bigger part knew he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. One evening, as Sean and I sat on our tiny balcony, watching the sunset, he turned to me. "You know, I never thanked you properly." "For what?" I asked, leaning into him. "For being strong enough to stand up to my father. For not giving up on us. You saved this family, Mia." I took his hand, feeling the sense of peace for the first time in years. We saved each other. As the sky turned pink and gold, I thought about how far we'd come, from a house built on lies to a home grounded in trust and love. It hadn't been easy, and there would still be tough days ahead, but we faced them together, stronger than ever. Robert had tried to tear us apart, but in the end, his betrayal only brought us closer. We'd walk through fire and come out the other side, scared but unbroken. And now we were unstoppable. Asterisk, asterisk. Now, a question for you. Asterisk, asterisk. If you were in Maya's shoes, would you have forgiven Linda for staying silent about Robert's theft? Or was her fear a justifiable reason to keep quiet? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hey there, I'm Adalia. At 28, 3 years into what was supposed to be my dream job at my husband's family construction business, I'd come to realize that dream might have been a stretch. Every day felt like a new battle, and not the kind I'd ever anticipated. "How was your day?" Mark, my husband, asked, looking up from the kitchen as I dropped my briefcase by the door. I sighed. "Same as always. Your dad's still giving me a hard time about the new accounting software." Mark frowned, a familiar crease forming between his brows. "He's just set in his ways. Give him time." Time, that's all I've been giving. But Victor, my father-in-law, the CEO and self-proclaimed expert in how things have always been done, wasn't budging. Sure, the company was financially stable, but operationally, it was stuck in the Stone Age. You wouldn't believe what happened today. I flopped onto the couch beside Mark. I suggested we digitize the bidding process, and Victor looked at me like I'd suggested tearing down the office walls. Mark chuckled. "That's dad for you." But I wasn't laughing. The next day, I ran into Emma, my sister-in-law, who despite our differences, was the only one who truly got what I was going through. "How's the modernization crusade?" she whispered, leaning on my desk. "About as effective as teaching a cat to swim," I replied, rolling my eyes. Just then, Robert, my cousin-in-law and the resident brown-noser, sauntered by. "Hey, Adalia, heard you're trying to reinvent the wheel again. Why fix what isn't broken, right?" I bit my tongue, holding back what I really wanted to say. If only he knew how unbroken things actually were. Later, that week, we had a company golf outing. I thought maybe, just maybe, a more relaxed setting would make Victor more receptive to my ideas. I couldn't have been more wrong. Victor, I began as we walked to the ninth hole. I've been thinking about our bidding process. If we could just. He cut me off, his voice sharp. Adelia, we've been doing just fine for 30 years. We don't need your newfangled ideas. But if we could just look at. Enough, he bellowed, loud enough for everyone on the course to turn and stare. You think you can waltz in here and change everything? You don't know the first thing about running a real business. I stood there, golf club in hand, my face burning with humiliation as Mark avoided my gaze, choosing instead to stare at the ground. That night, I tossed and turned, reliving every excruciating second. You okay? Mark mumbled, half asleep beside me. Yeah, I lied, staring at the ceiling. Just thinking about work. But lying there in the dark, I realized this went beyond simple resistance to change. Something was wrong, and I was going to find out what it was. Little did I know, I was about to uncover more than I'd bargained for. The weeks after the golf incident were tense. I felt eyes on me everywhere in the office. One morning, as I passed the water cooler, I overheard Robert murmuring to a group of colleagues. I'm just saying, it's weird how she's always poking around in the old files. What's she looking for, anyway? I clenched my jaw and walked by, pretending I hadn't heard, but his words wouldn't leave my mind. That afternoon, I made a decision. I was going to dig deeper into those old files. What I found made my stomach lurch. Mark, you need to see this, I said that night, spreading out the papers across our dining table. There are huge discrepancies in the company's finances from before I started working here. Mark barely looked up from his phone. I'm sure it's just a clerical error, babe. Don't stress over it. This isn't a simple error, Mark. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars unaccounted for. He sighed, finally meeting my gaze. Adelia, please just let it go. You're already on thin ice with Dad. I couldn't believe it. So you want me to ignore potential fraud? That's not what I'm saying, he muttered, looking away. Just be careful, okay? The next day, Victor cornered me in my office. I hear you've been asking questions about our old records. I was just double-checking some figures, making sure everything matches up. Your job, he snapped, is to manage current finances, not dig up the past. Stick to your own work. From that day on, Victor's hostility escalated. He demanded hourly updates, questioned every decision I made, and started CCing Robert on all our email exchanges. Then, one evening as I was working late, as Victor's raised voice cut through the walls of his office, I crept closer, curiosity getting the best of me. You promised this wouldn't be traced back to us, he hissed, each word dripping with tension. My heart raced. Missing funds? This was bigger than I'd ever suspected, and I knew I couldn't face it alone. The next day, I found Emma in the break room. Em, I need a favor, I said, my voice low. Can you help me access some of the really old financial records? She raised an eyebrow, glancing around. The ones in the storage room. Why? I can't explain right now, but it's important. Please. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, but be careful. Dad's been on the warpath. Later that week, we gathered for a family dinner at Victor and Martha's house. The tension was thick, and Victor's glares kept landing on me. Finally, he slammed his fork down, making everyone jump. I can't take this anymore, Adelia. What's your endgame here? Excuse me, I asked, taken aback. Don't play dumb, he snapped. The questions, the snooping. Are you trying to take over my company? The room fell silent, everyone watching me. I glanced at Mark, hoping for support, but he just stared at his plate. Victor, I'm just trying to do my job, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Your job, he scoffed. Your job is whatever I say it is, you ungrateful. Dad, that's enough, Emma cut in, but the damage was done. The car ride home with Mark was silent, each second thick with words left unsaid. Finally, I whispered, you could have said something. Mark gripped the steering wheel tighter. What did you want me to say, Adelia? You're the one stirring up trouble. In that moment, I knew I was on my own, but I wasn't backing down. There was something rotten in that company, and I was going to expose it, no matter the cost. A few nights later, Emma and I sat huddled around my laptop, her face pale in the dim light. This is insane, she whispered. How did they think they'd get away with this? They almost did, I replied, but not anymore. Days turned into nights as I compiled evidence, triple-checking every detail. By Friday, I had a report so solid it could withstand a hurricane. I arrived at the office early, gripping my presentation folder, heart pounding. As I got out of my car, the sound of clinking golf clubs made me freeze. Victor stood there, a dark glint in his eye. Going somewhere important, Adelia, he sneered, tapping a golf club against his palm. Victor, save it, he spat. You think I don't know what you've been up to? Digging around in things that don't concern you? You've got it all wrong. If you just let me explain. Explain, he roared, his face turning a shade of red I'd never seen before. Explain how you're embezzling from my company. What? No, that's not. But before I could finish, he lunged at me, swinging the golf club with alarming speed. I ducked, heart pounding, and stumbled back. You ungrateful little thief, he bellowed, swinging wildly as I scrambled across the parking lot, his shouts echoing behind me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw office windows fill with faces, some even holding up phones to record. Help, I screamed, narrowly dodging another swing. Somebody stop him. Finally, 2 security guards rushed forward, pulling Victor back as I collapsed against a parked car, gasping for breath. This isn't over, he shouted as they dragged him away. You're finished in this town, Adelia. Shaking, I did the only thing I could think of. I called Emma. I'll be right there, she said, her voice tight with concern. An hour later, I sat in Emma's living room, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands as I recounted everything. He's lost his mind, she murmured, shaking her head. We need to go to the police. Just then my phone buzzed. It was Mark. Adelia, where are you? Dad told me what happened. How could you do this to us? My blood ran cold. Mark, you can't seriously believe. I don't know what to believe anymore. He cut me off. But I think it's best if you don't come home tonight, or for a while. The line went dead, and I stared at the phone, disbelief giving way to hot, steaming tears. He believes them, I whispered, my voice breaking. After everything, he still believes them over me. Emma wrapped an arm around my shoulders. I'm so sorry, Adelia. What are you going to do? I wiped my tears, a fire igniting in my chest. I'm going to fight back. I straightened, my voice stronger than I felt. I'm going to clear my name and make them pay for every lie, every stolen dollar, and every moment of pain they've caused. Emma squeezed my hand, her steady presence grounding me, and I'll be right there with you. With Emma's support, I hired a top-notch forensic accountant to validate my findings. When he confirmed everything, I knew it was time to act. I sent an anonymous tip to both the IRS and the FBI, alerting them to the company's financial irregularities. While the investigation unfolded, I focused on rebuilding my life. I launched a small business consultancy specializing in financial systems for startups. It wasn't easy, but word spread fast. Adelia, your system has saved us thousands already. One of my first clients told me the appreciation rekindling the confidence I'd almost forgotten. Months passed, and news of the investigation into Victor's company began making waves. Over coffee one day, Emma gave me an update. Robert's been shredding documents like crazy, she said with a smirk. And Dad, he's not handling it well. I tried not to relish their downfall, but it was hard. They had made their choices, and now they had to face the consequences. One evening, as I was locking up my office, I turned and saw Mark. He looked exhausted, dark circles etched under his eyes. Adelia, please, he began, voice strained. Can we talk? I'm sorry. I should have believed you. A pang of hurt cut through me, but I kept it buried. It's too late, Mark. You made your choice. I turned to leave, but he called after me, voice thick with regret. I was wrong. Please give me another chance. I didn't stop. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. The investigation dragged on for months, but finally, the truth came out. Victor and Robert were charged with years of tax evasion, fraud. The news broke like a bombshell. Breaking news. Local construction mogul Victor Steele and his nephew Robert Steele indicted on multiple charges of financial fraud. I watched the report, stunned. It was finally over. The next day, Emma called me in tears. Dad's had a heart attack. He's in the hospital, she said, voice trembling. Meanwhile, the company teetered on the brink of bankruptcy under the weight of the penalties. As they fell, my business flourished. I had built a small but dedicated team, and together, we were helping other businesses avoid the very pitfalls that had taken down Victor's empire. A year after that fateful confrontation in the parking lot, I found myself on stage, accepting an award for financial integrity.
The lights warmed my face as I held the award, a bittersweet reminder of the journey it had taken to reach this moment. This award is for all the honest, hardworking financial professionals out there, I said into the microphone. Never be afraid to stand up for what's right, even when it feels like the whole world is against you. As I stepped off the stage, my phone buzzed with a news alert: Victor and Robert Steele sentenced in landmark fraud case. A small, satisfied smile tugged at my lips. Justice had been served, and I was finally free to write my own story. Now, here's a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have given Mark a second chance? When does betrayal become unforgivable? And is there ever a point where family no longer comes first? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and opinions could help someone else facing the same dilemma. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories of resilience and justice. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Hey there, I'm Sarah Johnson. I am 32, single mom, and absolutely smitten with my 5-year-old daughter, Emily. We live in a small, cozy house out in the suburbs. It's nothing fancy, but it's ours. I work as a real estate agent, balancing the chaos of my job with the even crazier chaos of being a mom. It's tough, but somehow we manage. Now let me tell you about the real thorn in my side, my ex, Mark, and his overbearing mother, Barbara. Where do I even start? If Barbara shows up uninvited to one more of Emily's school events, I swear, I'm going to lose it. I vented to my best friend, Lisa, over coffee one morning. Lisa rolled her eyes. That woman needs a hobby, one that doesn't involve meddling in your life. You're telling me, I said with a sigh. And Mark? He just lets her get away with everything, like he's still a clueless teenager instead of a grown man with a kid. My thoughts drifted back to our marriage, a disaster from day one. Finding out he was cheating was bad enough, but the real kicker was Barbara blaming me for it. Can you believe that? At least David's been understanding through all this craziness, I said, referring to my boss. I don't know how I would manage without his support. Not many bosses would be cool with me ducking out for emergency custody hearings. You're lucky, Lisa replied. Most jobs would never allow that kind of flexibility. I glanced at my watch and groaned. Shoot, I've got to run. Emily's got her dance recital tonight. As I drove to pick her up from school, that familiar, gnawing anxiety returned. Ever since the divorce, I'd gone all out on home security. Top-of-the-line system, cameras, even a panic room. Sounds over the top, right? But with Mark and Barbara acting the way they had lately, I wasn't taking any chances. When I pulled up, there was Emily, my little ray of sunshine, her pigtails bouncing as she ran toward the car. Mommy, guess what? I got a gold star in math today, she announced proudly as she climbed in. That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Are you ready for your big performance tonight? The drive home was filled with chatter about her day, and I couldn't help but smile as she practiced her dance moves from her car seat. No matter the drama with Mark or Barbara, Emily was my world. I'd do anything to keep her safe and happy. Back home, the usual evening routine kicked in. Homework, dinner, and getting ready for the recital. Helping Emily into her tutu, I couldn't help but smile. These were the moments that made it all worth it. You're going to be the most beautiful ballerina up there, I said, adjusting her tiny tiara. Even prettier than Lily, she asked, eyes wide. I laughed, way prettier. But remember, it's not about being the prettiest, it's about having fun and doing your best, okay? She nodded solemnly before breaking into a giggle as I tickled her. On our way out the door, I took one last glance at the security panel. All set, cameras on, alarms armed. Probably overkill, but better safe than sorry, right? Later that night, after the recital, I finally had the house to myself. Emily was at her first sleepover with her best friend from dance class, and I was trying not to be that mom who calls every 5 minutes to check in. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch, ready to binge watch the series everyone had been raving about. But before I could start, I decided to check my voicemails. That's when I heard it. Barbara's voice, shrill and conspiratorial, not meant for my ears. Mark, honey, I've got it all planned out. When you pick up Emily next weekend, we'll head straight to the airport. I've already booked tickets to Arizona. By the time Sarah realizes what's happened, we'll be long gone. Emily will be so much better off with us, away from her manipulative mother.
My heart stopped. I must have replayed that message 5 times, hands trembling more with each listen. This couldn't be real. They were planning to take Emily away from me. My baby. I don't even remember dialing Rachel's number, but suddenly my lawyer's voice was on the other end. Sarah? What's wrong? It's nearly 10 p.m. Rachel? I gasped, barely holding back tears. They're going to take Emily, Barbara, and Mark. I have proof, a voicemail. What do I do? My voice cracked as I explained everything. Okay, Sarah, listen carefully, Rachel said, her tone firm. Do not delete that voicemail. We need to preserve it as evidence. Write down everything you remember, every detail. First thing tomorrow, we're going to the police. Tomorrow. But what if they try something tonight? I asked, my voice shaky. Emily's safe at her sleepover, right? They can't do anything right now, and we need to approach this carefully to make sure it sticks. Rachel's voice remained calm but firm. Exactly. They can't act tonight. What we need to do is make sure everything is handled properly. In the meantime, call your friend Lisa. You shouldn't be alone right now. I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. Okay, thanks, Rachel. 20 minutes later, Lisa burst through the door with a bottle of wine and a fire in her eyes. Those bastards. She fumed after I played her the voicemail. I always knew Barbara was crazy, but this is a whole new level. Fueled by adrenaline and fear, I began digging through old emails, texts, and every strange incident over the past year. It was as if a fog had lifted, and suddenly, everything started to make sense. Lisa, look at this, I said, pulling up photos on my phone. Remember when Emily came back from that visit with her hair cut short? Barbara said Emily had gum stuck in it, but look at this photo from the day before. Her hair was perfectly fine. I showed Lisa the images, my heart pounding. They cut her hair to look more like Mark's sister's kid. Lisa leaned in, eyes wide. Oh my God, you're right. And what about the time Emily kept talking about going to the zoo? Mark said they stayed at his mom's, but... She paused, eyes widening. They've been taking her places during supervised visits, probably telling her to keep it a secret. The realization hit me like a truck. How did I not see this before? Lisa grabbed my hand, her grip firm. This is not your fault. You're seeing it now, and we're going to stop them. I nodded, trying to believe her as I compiled everything into a folder. Screenshots, photos, notes. My heart raced with a mix of terror and determination. They weren't going to take my daughter. Not now, not ever. I should call and check on Emily, I said, reaching for my phone. Lisa gently took it from me. It's 2 a.m., Sarah. She's fine. You'll just wake her up, and right now, we need to focus on keeping you calm and getting this evidence in order. She was right, but every fiber of my being wanted to rush over and scoop Emily into my arms. Instead, I took a deep breath and turned back to my laptop. We had work to do. By morning, I was a bundle of nerves, jumping at every noise. When the doorbell rang, my heart stopped. I opened the door to find Mark and Barbara, all fake smiles and forced cheerfulness. We're here for Emily, Mark said, attempting to step inside. She's not ready yet, I lied, blocking the entrance. Why don't you wait outside? Barbara's eyes narrowed. Nonsense. We'll wait inside. Her voice rose as she called out, Emily, sweetie. Grandma's here. I felt sick as Emily ran to the door, her little backpack slung over her shoulder. Daddy, Grandma, she squealed, oblivious to the tension. Mark's voice dripped with false charm. Hey, pumpkin, ready for our big weekend? That's when I saw it, the glint in his eye. Something dark, something dangerous. Actually, Emily forgot something upstairs, I blurted, scooping her up. We'll be right back. I bolted up the stairs, Emily clutched tightly in my arms. Behind me, I heard Mark's footsteps pound up the stairs. Sarah, what the hell do you think you're doing? He shouted. Mommy, what's wrong? Emily asked, her voice small and confused. I didn't answer. I raced to the panic room, my hands trembling as I shoved the door shut just as Mark reached the top of the stairs. Sarah, open this goddamn door. He bellowed, pounding on the steel barrier. Emily whimpered in my arms. It's okay, baby, I whispered, fumbling for my phone. We're just playing a little game. My fingers shook as I dialed 911. Please, I gasped to the operator, my ex-husband and his mother are trying to kidnap my daughter. We're barricaded in my panic room, but I don't know how long the door will hold. Outside, I could hear Barbara's shrill voice. Mark, find something to break down this door. We're not leaving without Emily. Emily started to cry, clutching my shirt. Mommy, I'm scared. Why is Daddy so mad? I kissed the top of her head, trying to calm my racing heart. It's okay, sweetie. I'm here. We're safe. The operator's voice was calm and steady. Stay on the line, ma'am. Help is on the way. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Mark's pounding, Barbara's screeching, Emily's soft sobs. I tried to keep it together, but the fear was suffocating. Then finally, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of sirens. The pounding on the door stopped. Through the heavy steel, I could hear voices, then a knock on the panic room door. Mrs. Johnson, this is Officer Rivera. It's safe to come out now. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly opened the door. The hallway was filled with police officers. Mark and Barbara were being handcuffed, both red-faced and furious. You can't do this. She's lying. Barbara shrieked. An officer approached me. Ma'am, we'll need to hear that voicemail. With shaking hands, I played the recording. Mark's face went pale as Barbara's voice echoed through the hallway, detailing their plan to kidnap Emily. Mark Johnson, Barbara Johnson, you're under arrest for attempted kidnapping, the officers said as they were led away. Mark's eyes met mine, cold and threatening. This isn't over, Sarah. I'll get her back. I held Emily tighter, my heart hammering in my chest. But I knew the worst was behind us. For now at least we were safe. I knew this was just the beginning of a long battle. Mommy, Emily whispered, her little arms tightening around my neck. Can we go get ice cream? I laughed, tears still glistening in my eyes. Yeah, baby, we can get all the ice cream you want. The weeks after that terrifying night were a whirlwind. Rachel, my lawyer and guardian angel, led me through the endless maze of legal battles. We were in and out of courtrooms, filing motions, presenting evidence, and building our case. Your Honor, Rachel argued one afternoon, standing tall and confident, given the severity of the attempted kidnapping, we're requesting full custody for my client. Mark's lawyer, trying to paint me as a paranoid mother, threw everything he could at us. But that voicemail, Barbara's incriminating words, was undeniable. I'll never forget the sound of the judge's gavel as he delivered the ruling that changed everything. In light of recent events, full custody is granted to Sarah Johnson. Mr. Johnson's visitation rights are hereby revoked, pending further evaluation. Outside the courtroom, Rachel hugged me tightly. We did it, Sarah. You're safe now. But I knew it wasn't truly over. Barbara's trial for conspiracy to commit kidnapping was still on the horizon, and Mark was facing his own charges. Attempted breaking and entering violating court orders. The legal mess was far from sorted, but one thing was clear. Emily was safe with me. Both Emily and I started therapy soon after. Dr. Martinez, our therapist, was patient and kind, helping us navigate the emotional fallout from what had happened. I keep having nightmares, I confessed in one of my sessions. In them, I see Mark and Barbara taking Emily, and I'm frozen. I can't move. That's normal, Sarah. Dr. Martinez reassured me. You've been through a trauma. We'll work through it together. Slowly but surely, we started to heal. Emily's nightmares became less frequent, and I found myself throwing everything I had into my work. The focus was almost therapeutic in itself. Sarah, you've really stepped up your game, my boss David remarked one day. Clients are requesting you specifically. They say your determination inspires them. And life? Well, life went on. We built new routines, made new memories. Before I knew it, Emily's 6th birthday was fast approaching, and the house was buzzing with excitement. The day of the party, our backyard was filled with laughter, the air thick with the sugary smell of cake. Kids ran around with painted faces, giggling and squealing as they played. Lisa, ever the reliable friend, helped me hang the last of the decorations. Can you believe it's been a year? She asked, adjusting a balloon. I shook my head, watching Emily chase her friends, her giggles carrying on the breeze. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, other times like a lifetime ago. Just then, the TV inside caught my attention. The local news was covering Mark's sentencing. The anchor's voice was calm, but the words hit hard. In local news, Mark Johnson was sentenced to 5 years for his role in the attempted kidnapping of his daughter.
His mother, Barbara Johnson, faces trial next month. Mom, come play with us. Emily's voice broke through, pulling me back to the present. I smiled and joined the kids' game, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude. We had been through hell, but we come out stronger. Emily was safe, happy, and surrounded by love. We had made it through. But before I let you go, I want to ask, if you were in my shoes, would you ever consider letting Mark or Barbara back into Emily's life? Maybe after they've served their time, if they showed real change? Or would you keep that door shut forever? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And hey, if you enjoyed this wild ride, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life drama. Trust me, my story's far from over, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Hey everyone, I'm Brenda Edwards. Life has a way of throwing some serious curveballs, and maybe my story can help someone else dealing with family drama. You're really going to do that here. My brother-in-law James shoots me his usual judgmental look as I quietly check my blood sugar before our weekly family dinner. I've managed type 1 diabetes since I was 8 years old. But ever since I married Michael last year, James acts like I'm putting on a show. James, she needs to do this, Michael says, though I can hear the wariness in his voice. Defending me has started to wear him down. I just think it's a bit dramatic. My friend's cousin has diabetes, and she manages just fine without making it everyone's problem. James mutters. I focus on adjusting my insulin pump, biting my tongue. After 10 years in marketing management, I've learned which battles to pick. My sister Emma gets it though. She texted me earlier. Need backup at the Peterson Circus tonight. Well, Brenda dear, my mother-in-law, Diana, smiles with that sugary tone that grates my nerves. Have you tried those natural remedies I sent you? My yoga instructor swears by them. Maybe if you worked harder on your diet. Mom, the doctor said. Michael begins, but James cuts him off, waving dismissively. His latest business venture tanked, but somehow he's an expert on everything. Doctors are all in Big Pharma's pocket. Brenda's young. She should be able to control this with lifestyle changes. And speaking of lifestyle, Diana chimes in. When are you two planning to give me grandchildren? I'm concerned about Brenda's condition. Beside me, I feel Michael tense. We're focusing on our careers right now, Mom. Later that night, Emma calls. How bad was it? The usual. James basically called me a drug addict, and Diana's worried my defective genes might taint her grandchildren. What did Michael say? I sigh, glancing at our bedroom door where I can hear Michael talking to his mom on the phone. He's trying, but I don't know him. Last month, he actually asked if I could do my injections in private. Apparently, it makes his family uncomfortable. That's messed up, sis. This isn't normal. They don't get to question your literal medical condition. Family doesn't mean they can treat you like this. Emma's voice is firm. James is just bitter because he can't keep a business running for 6 months, and Diana's been enabling his garbage behavior since forever. I hear Michael wrapping up his call. I've got to go. Thanks for being my sanity check. Always here for you, sis, and Brenda, don't let them make you doubt yourself. You've handled this disease like a boss for 20 years. They don't get to rewrite that story. As I hang up, Michael comes in, looking troubled. Mom thinks we should come over more. She says we're becoming distant. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. Sometimes I wonder if this is what family should feel like, constantly defending yourself against people who should support you. Hey sis, I call Emma the next day. Something feels off. My sugar readings have been all over the place this week. What do you mean? Her concern comes through loud and clear. Ever since James started coming over to check in while Michael's at his conference, things feel weird. Yesterday, my sugar spiked to 300, even after my usual dose. He's been coming over. Emma sounds alarmed. Yeah, claims he's checking in since there have been break-ins nearby. Michael even gave him a spare key. I add, security's coming to install cameras today. Later that week, I'm struggling to stay conscious at my desk. My vision blurs, my thoughts muddle. A coworker notices and grabs my arm. Brenda, you look terrible. Your hands are shaking. I barely manage to check my glucometer. It reads 450. That's impossible, I whisper, feeling my knees give out. The rest is a blur. Sirens, paramedics, bright hospital lights, voices saying words like severe hyperglycemia, and could have died.
When I wake up in the ICU, Michael is by my side, clutching my hand, his face pale and stricken. Baby, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. James. What about James? I struggle to sit up, my heart monitor beeping faster. Michael looks crushed. The security footage. Emma checked it while you were unconscious. He's been replacing your insulin with water. Mom knew. She helped him plan it. My world spins as I process his words. What? There's video. Michael nods grimly, holding a tablet. He presses play, and the footage is unmistakable. James sneaking into our house, tampering with my insulin cartridges. In another clip, he's talking to Diana in our kitchen. She needs to learn, Diana says. Michael's too blinded by her act to see what she's doing to this family. James chuckles darkly. Don't worry, Mom. A few days without her precious insulin, and everyone will see she's been exaggerating this whole time. Michael's hands shake as he turns off the video. I've already called the police. They're reviewing everything. I'm done with them, Brenda. I chose them over you so many times, but I'm done. They could have killed you. I'm too exhausted to cry, too drained to feel angry, but watching Michael finally confront the truth about his family lifts a weight off my chest. The doctor said if Emma hadn't called when she did. I know, Michael whispers, anguish on his face. I'll never forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, for doubting you. You could have died because I was too weak to stand up to them. Just then, a detective enters, his expression grave. Ms. Edwards, during our investigation, something concerning came up in Mr. Peterson's background check. Emma leans forward, alarmed. What kind of something? Several complaints from former business partners, the detective explains. Accusations of sabotage, fraud. That tracks, Michael mutters. Anyone in his circle who succeeded suddenly had accidents, lost key files, or dealt with corrupted equipment. It was always suspicious, but no one could prove anything. My phone buzzes with a message from James's former business partner. Heard what happened. He did the same to me. Sabotaged my car brakes after I refused to sign over my shares. I have proof this time. Emma shows me her own findings. Brenda, look at these bank statements, she says, flipping through account records she managed to pull. Transfers of hundreds of thousands, all going to James' failed ventures. Michael's face crumples. Our dad has dementia. Mom has power of attorney, but she's been helping James siphon money from his own father's accounts. Just then, a nurse peeks in. Ms. Edwards, James Peterson is here. He says he needs to apologize. No, my voice is stronger than I feel. I don't want to see him. But it's too late. James pushes past the nurse, his eyes red and frantic. Brenda, please. I never meant. I just wanted to prove. Prove what? I snap, the fury breaking through my exhaustion. That I'm faking. Congratulations, you nearly killed me. You don't understand. Mom convinced me that. Get out, Michael says, standing between us, his voice ice cold. Out before I call security. Come on, Mike, we're family. Family? Michael's voice cracks. You tried to murder my wife, and now I find out you've been stealing from Dad? Mom's been covering up for you this whole time. It wasn't stealing. Dad would have wanted to help me succeed. Emma scoffs. Like you helped all your business partners succeed. James's face shifts and the familiar sneer returns. Little Miss Success Story, he snarls at me. You have no idea what it's like to fail, to watch everyone else succeed while you're stuck. So yeah, maybe I tried to knock you down a peg. To eliminate the competition, I asked, disgusted, starting with your own father? Everything I did for this family, James hisses. No, Michael says quietly, heartbreak written across his face. Everything you did for yourself, and Mom enabled it all. But it's over now, the police have the footage, the bank records, everything. James lunges forward, but security arrives just in time, dragging him out as he screams about loyalty and betrayal. When the door finally closes, Michael turns to me, his face broken. I chose wrong, Brenda. Every time I let them make me doubt you. Every time I stayed silent to keep the peace. I chose wrong. But never again, I say, taking Michael's hand as we watch James being led out of the hospital in handcuffs. Sometimes karma needs a little help from security cameras and bank records. Breaking news flashes across the screen. Local businessman James Peterson sentenced to 15 years for elder abuse and investment fraud. I turn up the volume, watching my former brother-in-law being taken away, satisfaction settling in. Just then, my phone rings. It's Diana. "Brenda, please," she says, her voice frail and desperate. "The family's falling apart. James's wife left with the kids. The country club revoked our membership. Everyone's talking. Sounds like consequences to me, Diana. Can't you ask Michael to speak to us? His father keeps asking for him." "Oh, you mean the father you helped steal from? That's rich." Just then, my phone buzzes with an email. "Guess who just made department head?" I cut her off, grinning. "You're talking to the youngest marketing director in company history. Look at you, thriving while they're diving." Emma texts me as I read aloud. "And by the way, your diabetes advocacy group got featured in the Times." "Diana, I have a life to live. One that doesn't involve people who tried to kill me. We never meant it. Brenda, please, the social services investigation is ruining us. Can't you just tell them it was a misunderstanding?" Of like how James misunderstood his way into his father's bank account? Or how you misunderstood all those forged signatures. Here's the thing, Diana. Family should forgive, but family shouldn't try to murder each other. Goodbye. I hang up just as Michael pulls up to pick me up for dinner. He hasn't spoken to his family since the hospital. That was his choice, not mine. James's sentencing was today. I tell him as he settles in beside me. 15 years. Michael nods, his expression grim. "Dad's nursing home call," he adds. "He's doing better now that he's away from them. Actually remembering things. Funny how that happens when people aren't drugging you to steal your money." My phone buzzes again. Another message from Diana. "Please, everyone's abandoned us. The church committee asked me to step down. James's wife won't let us see the grandkids." I show Michael the message and he deletes it without reading. "You know what's crazy?" I say, watching the news recap James's fall from grace. "They really thought they'd get away with it. All of it. They always did before. Dad's money, Mom's influence. There were never any consequences. Until they messed with the wrong diabetic." I smile as Emma sends me a new photo. Diana leaving the social services building, hiding her face from reporters. No more charity galas, no more social clubs. Just a lonely woman, now stripped of her illusion of control and respect. "Ready for dinner?" Michael asks. "That new place downtown?" I smile. "Yeah, just let me check my insulin. My real, untampered insulin." As we leave, I glance at the news one last time. James in handcuffs, Diana in disgrace, their victims finally getting justice. And me? I'm not just surviving. I'm thriving. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to toxic people. It's living your best life while karma does the heavy lifting. So, what would you do if you discovered your own family had been gaslighting you about your health? Would you press charges immediately, or would you gather evidence first, like I did? And here's something to consider. Was Michael partially responsible for enabling his family's behavior by not standing against them sooner? Should he have seen the red flags? I'm curious to hear your stories of dealing with toxic family members and how you handled betrayal from those who were supposed to protect you. Did you cut ties completely or try to maintain a relationship? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Hi, I'm Emily Foster, a 32-year-old executive, and let me tell you, life has been one wild ride. It all started 2 years ago when my husband Jack and I decided we were ready to start a family. We thought it would be simple, but boy, were we wrong. Month after month, nothing happened. We tried everything, tracking ovulation, changing diets, even taking these strange herbs my friends swore by. But still nothing. Then finally, one day we got lucky. I'll never forget it. 2 little pink lines on that pregnancy test. We were over the moon. But our joy didn't last. At our 12-week scan, the doctor couldn't find a heartbeat. Just like that, our world shattered. The miscarriage hit me harder than I ever expected. I felt broken, like my body had betrayed me. Jack was supportive, but I could see the pain in his eyes too. We were both lost, trying to pick up the pieces. And then my mother-in-law, Linda, decided it was the perfect time for a big birthday bash. Talk about terrible timing. But she insisted, claiming it would lift everyone's spirits. Yeah, right. So there we were, getting ready for this family dinner. I stood in front of the mirror, trying to convince myself I could get through it. "You can do this, Emily," I repeated. It's just dinner. How bad could it be? Little did I know, it was about to be a total disaster. As we drove to Linda's, Jack squeezed my hand. You okay, babe? He asked, his voice gentle. I forced a smile. Yeah, I'm fine. Just, you know. He nodded. I know, we'll get through this together. When we arrived, Linda greeted us with her usual enthusiasm. Oh, darlings. So glad you could make it, she said, wrapping me in a tight hug. How are you holding up, dear? I'm okay, I lied, plastering on a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. That's when I saw him, Tom, Jack's brother. He was already 3 sheets to the wind, sprawled on a couch with a glass of whiskey in hand. Great, just what we needed. Well, Tom slurred, if it isn't the happy couple. How's life treating you too? I bit my tongue, forcing myself to stay calm. It was going to be a long night. As we sat down for dinner, the tension was thick in the air. Linda kept throwing me worried glances, while Jack's dad, George, was determined to keep his attention solely on his plate. So, Emily, Tom started again, his words thick with alcohol. When are you two going to give Mom and Dad some grandkids? Tick-tock. It felt like a punch to the gut. I forced myself to breathe, trying not to let the tears well up. Jack's hand tightened on my knee under the table. Tom, that's enough, Linda warned, her voice tight. But Tom wasn't done. I'm just asking. It's not like it's a secret. You've been trying. Maybe you're just not doing it right, huh? The tears I'd been holding back threatened to spill. This was exactly what I feared. Jack's face went red with anger, his grip on my knee tightening even more. Tom, seriously. Shut up, Jack growled. But Tom just laughed. Oh, come on, it's just a joke. Lighten up, you two. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly, the screech of my chair against the floor cutting through the tension. Excuse me, I muttered, fleeing to the bathroom. Once inside, I splashed cold water on my face, trying to calm the storm building in my chest. I could hear raised voices coming from the dining room, and it felt like the walls were closing in. How was I going to survive the rest of this nightmare? I took a deep breath and forced myself to step back into the lion's den. The second I entered, every pair of eyes turned toward me. I pasted a smile on my face and sat back down. Everything okay, dear? Linda asked, her voice dripping with concern. Just peachy, I replied flatly. Tom snorted from across the table. Yeah, I'm sure. Hey, Emily, he slurred, his grin smug. How's that big jacketing job of yours going? Still pushing pencils and playing with pretty pictures. I gritted my teeth. It's going great, Tom. We just landed a major account last week. Oh wow, he drawled. I'm sure that's real fulfilling. Tell me, does it make up for not having a real family? Jack's hand slammed down onto the table with a force that made the plates rattle. That's enough, Tom. But Tom was on a roll. What? I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. When are you two gonna stop playing house and start taking on some real responsibilities? I could feel my face burning, my pulse racing. Our life choices are none of your business, Tom. Oh, touchy subject, huh? He leaned in, his breath heavy with whiskey. Having trouble in that department? You know, stress can really mess with fertility. Maybe if you weren't so focused on your career. Tom, please, Linda pleaded, her voice strained. This isn't appropriate dinner conversation. But Tom wasn't listening. I'm just trying to help. You two want kids, right? Or is this one of those career women don't need babies things? He looked at me with a sickening smirk. You know, maybe it's for the best. I mean, if you can't even carry a baby to term, maybe it's nature's way of saying you shouldn't be a mother. The room went dead silent. The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. How dare he? How dare he? How dare you? I whispered, my voice trembling. I stood up so quickly my chair screeched against the floor. Without another word, I turned and fled the room. The days after that nightmare dinner were a blur of anger and hurt. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. It hung over me like a dark cloud. Jack tried to comfort me, but I could see he was struggling too. We were both broken in different ways. Finally, I called Rachel. We met up, and I spilled everything. Everything Tom had said, how he humiliated me, how he'd hurt Emma. Rachel's eyes went wide. Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. What a complete jerk. I nodded, trying to fight back the tears. I can't let him get away with this, Rachel. Not just what he did to me, but how he treated Emma. It's not right. Rachel bit her lip, looking thoughtful. Actually, there might be something we can do. What do you mean? She leaned in close, her voice low. Okay, this is just between us, but I think Tom's been embezzling from the company. I nearly choked on my latte. Are you sure? Not 100%, but I've seen some weird transactions, things that don't add up. I just haven't found solid proof yet. My mind was racing. If we could find evidence. Rachel nodded. Exactly. We could take him down, Emily. For real. As I was leaving the coffee shop, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Linda. Emma left Tom. She's staying with her friend Julie. My heart sank. Poor Emma. Maybe I should have called Julie. Maybe I should have asked for Emma's number. My hands were shaking as I dialed her, my heart hammering in my chest. Hello? Emma, I said, my voice soft. It's Emily, Jack's sister-in-law. I heard what happened. Are you okay? There was a long pause, and when Emma spoke, her voice sounded small, exhausted. Not really, but I will be. We talked for almost an hour. Emma opened up about Tom's abuse, how he controlled her, manipulated her, and used her for his own gain. It made me sick to my stomach, hearing it all out loud. But there was more. There's more, Emma said, her voice quiet but steady. Tom's involved in some shady stuff at work. I don't know all the details, but I've overheard things, dealings that didn't sound legal. My heart started to race. This could be it. Emma, I know this is a lot to ask, but would you be willing to help us stop Tom? Another pause. Yes, she said, her voice firm. I'm done being afraid of him. In the weeks that followed, the three of us, Rachel, Emma, and I, became a well-oiled machine. Rachel dove into the company's financials, uncovering discrepancies and unexplained transfers. Emma provided dates, names, anything she could remember from Tom's shady dealings. And me? I documented everything, piecing it all together like an ugly, twisted puzzle. One night, Rachel leaned over her laptop, pointing to the screen. Look at this, she said. These transfers. They're going to offshore accounts. And look at the dates. I gasped. The dates lined up perfectly with Tom's lavish vacations, his new car, his expensive clothes. Emma nodded, her face tight. He always said it was from bonuses or smart investments. I should have known better. As we dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Tom wasn't just stealing to fund his flashy lifestyle. He had a gambling problem. A big one. He was using company funds to cover his losses, sinking deeper and deeper into the hole. This is it, I said, looking at the mountain of evidence we collected. This is how we take him down. Rachel squeezed my hand. Are you sure about this, Emily? Once we do this, there's no going back. I thought about that nightmare dinner, about all the pain Tom had caused. Not just to me, but to Emma, to the company, to everyone around him. I was sure. I'm sure. It's time Tom faces the consequences of his actions. We triple-checked everything before sending the evidence to the company's board and tipping off a journalist friend of Rachel's. A week later, we were at another family gathering, this time for Grandma Elizabeth's birthday. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tom showed up late, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Jack and I were talking when he pulled him aside, his voice urgent. Jack, bro, can I talk to you for a sec? Jack glanced at me before nodding. Sure, what's up? Tom pulled him aside, but not far enough. I could hear every word. I'm in a bit of a jam, man, Tom said, his voice low and almost desperate. Just temporary, you know. But I was wondering if I could borrow some cash, just to tide me over. Jack hesitated. How much are we talking? 20 grand. 30 tops. I'll pay you back, I swear. I stood up, my voice calm but firm. No, Tom. We're not lending you money. Tom's face darkened and he shot me a glare. This isn't your business, Emily. Actually, it is, I said, holding my ground. Jack and I are a team, and the answer is no. Just then, the doorbell rang. Linda went to answer it, and I heard her gasp. 2 police officers stepped into the room. Thomas Foster, one of them called. Tom's face went pale. Yeah, that's me. What's this about? You're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud, the officer said. You have the right to remain silent. As they led Tom away, one of the officers explained that an anonymous tip had led to a company investigation, uncovering extensive evidence of Tom's crimes. In the aftermath, the family was reeling. Linda approached me, tears in her eyes. Emily, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up to Tom long ago. Can you ever forgive me? I hugged her tightly. There's nothing to forgive. We were all under his spell. George came over, his voice gruff with emotion. You did good, kid. Real good. I'm proud of you. And Grandma Elizabeth? She just gave me a wink and a knowing smile. I had a feeling she'd seen through Tom long before any of us. A month later, I sat in a doctor's office, clutching Jack's hand. The sound of a strong, steady heartbeat filled the room. Congratulations, the doctor said with a smile. Your baby looks perfect. As we left the clinic, I couldn't stop smiling. Can you believe it, Jack? We're really doing this. He kissed me softly. I can. You're the strongest person I know. Emily, this kid is lucky to have you as a mom. Now, here's my question for you. If you were in Emily's shoes, would you have exposed Tom's crimes, knowing it could tear your family apart? Or would you have kept quiet to maintain family peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. They say time heals all wounds, but no one ever tells you how to handle it when someone tries to cover them up with a designer smile and a new wedding ring. Hi, I'm Giselle, and this is how my family drama unraveled. At 26, I should be living my best life. I've got a sweet gig as a software engineer at a hot tech startup, my own apartment, and well, that's where it gets tricky. See, 10 years ago, my mom and I were in a car accident. I walked away with scars, both physical and emotional. Mom didn't walk away at all. The memories of that day cling to me like shadows. The screeching tires, the shattering glass, and my mom's final words, I love you, Giselle. Be strong. Some days it feels like it happened just yesterday. Other days it feels like a lifetime ago. My dad and younger brother, Ethan, have moved on, each in their own way. But me, I'm still stuck, one foot anchored in the past, unable to let go. And then 6 months ago, Dad dropped a bombshell. Giselle, honey, I've met someone. Her name is Cynthia, and we're getting married. Cynthia, former model. 38. A smile that could light up Times Square, and an attitude that could dim it just as fast. From the moment I met her, it was clear she saw me as a threat. Oh, Giselle, cheap purr, her voice laced with fake sweetness. Still single. Don't worry, dear. There's someone out there for everyone. Eventually. Every word was a subtle dig, sharp enough to cut but wrapped in enough sugar to seem harmless. But I grit my teeth and endured it. For Dad's sake. After everything we'd been through, didn't he deserve to be happy? My best friend and coworker, Aisha, she gets it. Girl, you need to set some boundaries with this woman, she said over lunch last week. She's not your mom, and she never will be. Easier said than done, especially with Thanksgiving looming. As I pull up to Dad's house, my stomach tightens into a knot. The house looks different now. Mom's warm, welcoming decorations have been replaced with Cynthia's sleek, modern taste. It feels like I'm walking into a stranger's home. I take a deep breath, bracing myself for what's to come. You can do this, Giselle, I mutter under my breath. It's just one day. But as I ring the doorbell, memories of past Thanksgivings flood back. The smell of Mom's famous apple pie, her laughter blending with the sound of the Macy's parade on TV. Now it's the scent of some fancy catered meal and the clicking of Cynthia's designer heels. The door swings open, and there she is, Cynthia in all her perfectly coiffed glory. Giselle, darling, she beams, her smile too perfect to be real. So glad you could make it. Come in, come in. I force a smile, stepping inside. The weight of the past presses down on me, while the uncertainty of the future lingers like a storm cloud on the horizon. Little do I know, this Thanksgiving is about to make all those past family dinners look like a walk in the park. But hey, that's family, right? Sometimes the ties that bind can also strangle. The dinner starts like a powder keg just waiting for a spark. The tension in the air is thick enough to slice through, and Cynthia's smile is as plastic as the decorative turkeys on the table. Giselle, dear, would you like some wine? Cynthia asks, her voice saccharine as ever. Sure, thanks. I nod stiffly, watching as she pours. I can't help but notice the changes around me. Mom's beloved china is nowhere to be found, replaced by sleek, modern plates that scream Cynthia. Dad clears his throat awkwardly. So, Ethan, how's school going? Grateful for the distraction, Ethan jumps into a story about his latest project. But Cynthia, of course, isn't interested. That's nice, sweetie, she interrupts, but let's talk about something more interesting.
Cynthia's voice dripped with fox enthusiasm as she set her wine glass down and fixed her gaze on me. Giselle, any men in your life? I nearly choked on my wine. I'm focusing on my career right now, I managed, hoping to steer the conversation elsewhere. Cynthia's eyes gleamed with amusement as she teased, "Oh honey, you don't want to wait too long." Tick-tock. She gestured dramatically with her hand as if she had just dropped some life-changing wisdom. Dad shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Cynthia, maybe we should." "Oh Robert," she cut him off with a laugh, patting his hand condescendingly. "I'm just looking out for her. That's what mothers do, right?" The word mothers hit me like a slap. My grip on the fork tightened as memories of my mom came flooding back. Cynthia's presence felt like an eraser, rubbing away everything that made my family my family. As dinner dragged on, her attempts to assert dominance only grew bolder. She spoke as though she had always been a part of our family, casually claiming traditions and moments that had nothing to do with her. Each time, it was as though Mom's memory was being erased, bit by bit, with every word that left Cynthia's mouth. And then, halfway through dinner, she dropped a bomb. "You know, Giselle," Cynthia said, setting her fork down with exaggerated grace, "I think it's time you started calling me Mom. We're family now, after all." The table fell silent. Everyone's eyes were suddenly on me, the tension so thick it felt like I couldn't breathe. I can't do that, Cynthia," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not comfortable with it." Her face hardened in an instant. "And why not? I'm married to your father. I'm the woman of this house now. Because you're not my mother." This time my voice was stronger, the words pushing up from the core of my being. "My mom died 10 years ago, and I'm not ready to call anyone else that." Her eyes flashed with anger, and her lips curled into a sneer. "Well, it's time you got over that, don't you think? It's been a decade. Giselle, stop living in the past." "Cynthia, enough," Dad warned, but she wasn't listening. "No, Robert," she shot back. "She needs to hear this. I've been patient. I've tried to be understanding. But I am tired of walking on eggshells in my own home. I am your wife, and I deserve respect." "Respect is earned," I snapped, the years of bottled-up emotion finally bubbling to the surface. "And you can't force someone to see you as their mother." What happened next felt like slow motion. Cynthia stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her face was twisted in rage as she raised her hand. And then it came down, a sharp slap that echoed through the room. My cheek stung where her palm connected, but the pain was nothing compared to the shock that rippled across the table. For a moment, everything was frozen. Then chaos erupted. Dad jumped up, putting himself between us, his voice a frantic blur. Ethan was shouting something I couldn't quite make out, but I couldn't focus on any of it. I was back in that car, 10 years ago, the world spinning out of control around me. Without a word, I grabbed my purse and bolted for the door. I could hear Dad calling after me, but I didn't stop. The drive home was a blur of tears and the dull ache in my cheek. When I finally made it back to my apartment, I sat in front of the mirror, staring at the red mark on my face. It wasn't just about the slap. It was about everything that had led to this moment, about how Cynthia was threatening to tear apart what little remained of our family, and about how I could no longer stand by and let it happen. Something had to change. I picked up my phone and dialed Dad's number. It was time to have a serious talk about Cynthia and the future of our family, because if there was one thing Mom had taught me, it was that family was worth fighting for, even when the fight got ugly. The days after the Thanksgiving disaster were a blur of missed calls from Dad and a growing sense of dread gnawing at my gut. I replayed every moment with Cynthia in my mind, searching for the clues I'd missed, the signs I had ignored. She wasn't just trying to be the new mom, she was trying to isolate Dad from us. "I can't believe she hit you," Aisha said, her voice filled with outrage over coffee. "That's straight up assault." I nodded, absently touching my cheek. "It's not just the slap. It's everything. The way she's been acting. It's like she's trying to erase Mom entirely." That's when the realization hit me. Cynthia wasn't just angling to replace Mom. She was systematically isolating Dad. I started digging. It wasn't hard to find dirt on Cynthia. Former models leave quite the digital trail, and what I found made my blood run cold. 3 marriages, I muttered, scrolling through old news articles. All to wealthy older men, and each one ended in a messy, expensive divorce.
but it was an anonymous comment on an old gossip blog that really made my skin crawl. Watch out for Cynthia. She'll bleed you dry and make you think it was your idea. I called Ethan, desperate to hear a familiar voice. Hey, how's Dad doing? Ethan sighed heavily. I don't know. Cynthia's got him convinced you overreacted. She's been talking about family therapy, saying we all need to heal. My stomach churned. Ethan, has she been trying to keep you from seeing Dad? The pause on the other end of the line was all the confirmation I needed. She keeps planning these couples trips, Ethan finally said, his voice weary. And when I try to visit, she always has some reason why it's not a good time. I took a deep breath. Ethan, we need to talk. In person, there's something you need to see. The next day, we met at a coffee shop, and I laid it all out, Cynthia's history of manipulation, her lavish spending, the emotional control. I watched Ethan's expression change from disbelief to shock as the reality set in. But Dad seems so happy, he said weakly. Does he? I countered. Or is he just afraid to rock the boat? As we pieced everything together, a clearer picture emerged. Cynthia's insecurity. Her need to be the center of attention. Her fear of aging and losing the lifestyle she clung to. She didn't see us as family. She saw us as a threat. So, what do we do now? Ethan asked, his voice low. I squared my shoulders, determination surging through me. We talk to Dad. We show him what we found. And we make him see what's really going on. Doubt crept in, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. Would Dad even believe us? Or had Cynthia's manipulation dug in too deep? He has to see it, Ethan said, echoing my thoughts. Once we lay it all out, he'll understand. I nodded, trying to convince myself as much as him. Right, we'll make him see. As we left the coffee shop, I felt a strange mix of determination and dread. This conversation wasn't going to be easy, but for the sake of our family, for Mom's memory, it had to be done. Over the next few days, I prepared meticulously, gathering evidence and bracing myself for the confrontation ahead. When I picked up the phone to arrange the meeting with Dad, I couldn't shake the feeling that this would change everything, for better or for worse. The truth about Cynthia was about to come out, and our family would never be the same. I set the meeting at our old favorite diner, a neutral spot far from Cynthia's influence. When Dad and Ethan slid into the booth, the tension between us was palpable. Thanks for coming, I began, my heart pounding. We need to talk about Cynthia. Dad's face tightened. Giselle, if this is about Thanksgiving. It's more than that, Dad, Ethan interjected. Please just hear us out. I took a deep breath and laid out everything we had uncovered. Cynthia's past marriages, her financial habits, her manipulation tactics. As I spoke, I watched Dad's expression shift from defensive to confused to devastated. I had no idea, he mumbled, staring into his coffee cup as though it held answers. Ethan leaned in, his voice gentle. Dad, has Cynthia been trying to keep you from seeing us? The silence was deafening. Finally, Dad nodded, his face weary. She always has a reason why it's not a good time for you to visit. I thought. He trailed off, shaking his head. I thought she was just trying to help us bond as a new family. And the Thanksgiving incident? I asked softly, testing the waters. Dad's eyes welled up. I should have stood up for you, Giselle. I'm so sorry. As we talked, the full extent of Cynthia's manipulation became clear. She had been subtly isolating us from each other, playing on our vulnerabilities. We'd all been caught in her web. What do we do now? Ethan asked. Dad straightened in his seat, a determination in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. We confront her. Together. Set some firm boundaries. The next day, we gathered at Dad's house. The moment Cynthia saw the three of us united, her saccharine smile faltered. What's going on? She asked, her voice tight, eyes flicking between us. Dad took the lead, his voice calm but resolute. Cynthia, we need to talk about your behavior and the future of this family. As he laid out our concerns, Cynthia's mask began to slip. Her carefully crafted facade cracked and anger twisted her features. You ungrateful brats. She screamed. After everything I've done for this family. Her outburst only confirmed what we already knew. Dad's face hardened, his voice steady. I think you should leave, Cynthia, he said quietly. This marriage, it was a mistake. Cynthia stormed out, hurling threats about lawyers and alimony. The sound of the door slamming behind her felt like a weight lifting off my chest. It wasn't over. There would be legal battles and emotional fallout. But for the first time in years, it felt like we were a family again. That night, as Dad, Ethan, and I sat around the kitchen table eating pizza, really talking for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized something. We had been so focused on preserving Mom's memory that we'd forgotten her greatest wish for us, to be happy and united. As we laughed and shared old family stories, I knew the road ahead would be long, but we'd face it together. Our foundation was stronger now, built on truth, love, and a shared understanding of what family truly meant. Now I have a question for you. Giselle and her family chose to confront Cynthia directly and cut ties. Do you think this was the right approach? Or should they have tried family therapy or given Cynthia a chance to change? Where do we draw the line between protecting our family and potentially breaking it apart? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective could spark an interesting discussion about family dynamics and dealing with toxic relationships. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more compelling tales of family drama and personal growth. Your support helps keep these thought-provoking stories coming.
Hi, I'm Amy, a 28-year-old third-grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary. My days are filled with chalk dust and eager young minds. Amy, the kids really respond to your teaching style, Principal Howard said as I finished another day at school. Thanks, I replied with a smile. It's not always easy on a teacher's salary, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Teaching is my passion, though I'll admit the monthly allowance for my dad makes life in my cozy apartment near school more manageable. Dad and I have been close since Mom passed when I was 15. He's always supported my dreams, even when they didn't align with the corporate ambitions he once had for me. Amy, honey, I want you to meet someone special, Dad said one evening. Come over for dinner this Saturday. That's how I met Melissa. She entered Dad's house like she owned the place, her designer heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Richard has told me so much about you. I just know we're going to be great friends, she gushed, her smile a little too perfect. She's a successful real estate agent, Dad said, beaming at her like a smitten teenager. We met at the country club. Over the next 3 months, things got complicated. My friend Sarah, who works at the courthouse, dropped a cryptic comment during one of our weekly coffee meetups. Melissa Roberts, huh? That name rings a bell, and not in a good way. I kept quiet, observing as Melissa expertly wrapped Dad around her finger. Then came the text that changed everything. Big news, Princess. I'm having an engagement dinner next weekend. I've asked Melissa to marry me. Already? After only 3 months? Dad, don't you think this is a bit fast? I asked when I called him back. When you know, he said with an unshakable cheer. Don't you want your old man to be happy? Of course I do, but... Great, then you'll be there Saturday at 7. We're meeting at Le Blanc restaurant. Melissa's whole family will be there. It's important to me, Amy. I hung up, my stomach in knots. The Melissa I'd been watching didn't match the version Dad believed in. She avoided any talk of her past and always changed the subject when her family came up. Sarah's warning echoed in my mind. Be careful, Amy. Some people aren't who they pretend to be. I didn't know it then, but that engagement dinner would force me to choose between my father's happiness and my own integrity. The night before the dinner, Dad called me. His tone was unusually stern. We need to talk, he said. Sure, I replied cautiously. I'll come over now. When I walked into his study, Melissa was there, her usual practiced smile replaced by something colder. Amy, honey, we need a favor, Dad began, fidgeting with a pen. Melissa cut in smoothly. My family is very traditional, and they need to believe this is my first marriage. What are you saying? I asked, my voice sharp. It means, Melissa continued, you need to back us up. Tell them you've known me for a year and that I've never been married. But that's not true. Dad leaned forward, his face hard. Melissa was married before. She has 2 kids and declared bankruptcy 3 years ago. Her family can't know. You want me to lie? I'm not asking, Dad said, his tone turning icy. I'm telling you, this is happening. No, I won't do it. Dad's expression darkened. Then I'll cut off your allowance, every penny. I stared at him stunned. You're blackmailing me. Don't be so dramatic, he snapped. I'm asking you to help your father be happy. Dad, this isn't like you.
Can't you see what's happening here? What I see, he growled, slamming his hand on the desk, is my daughter being selfish. After everything I've done for you, you can't do this one thing. Melissa touched his arm. Richard, I told you she wouldn't understand. She's always been jealous of our relationship. Jealous? I barely know you. See? Melissa said, her eyes welling with tears. She's attacking me after I've tried so hard. That's enough, Dad roared, standing up. Amy, either you help us tomorrow or you can forget about any financial support. And don't bother coming around here anymore. Dad, please, I begged. Listen to yourself. This isn't. Get out. The words hit me like a slap. My father, the man who had always been my rock, was now a stranger. I backed away, my heart breaking as I left. Watching my father's face contort with anger as I reached the door, I froze for a moment, unsure if I was leaving for good. When I glanced back, Melissa smirked, a look of triumph glinting in her eyes the moment Dad wasn't watching. You're making a mistake, she called after me, her voice laced with venom. Both financially and, well, let's just say you'd better hope your teaching position is secure. I have friends on the school board, standing in the driveway, shaking with a mix of anger and grief. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. You were right about her, I said, my voice trembling. And now I've lost my dad. No, Amy, Sarah said firmly. He lost you. And trust me, this is just the beginning of what we're going to uncover about your almost stepmother. As I walked to my car, a painful realization struck me. The father I knew, the one who had always been my rock, died with that ultimatum. The man back there, threatening his daughter over a web of lies, wasn't him. He was Melissa's puppet, and somehow I was going to prove it. Unveiling the truth, moving into a smaller apartment was tough, but it was nothing compared to what Sarah showed me during lunch at the courthouse a few weeks later. Amy, look at this, Sarah said, spinning her laptop toward me. Melissa Roberts, or should I say Melissa Thompson, Williams, or Baker. She's got more names than a phone book. Leaning over, I scanned the documents. These are fraud cases. 6 cases across 3 states. She's careful, Sarah said. Always manages to settle out of court. But wait until you see who I found. That's how I ended up in a coffee shop across from Jack Thompson, Melissa's ex-husband. She just left, Jack said bitterly. No warning. The kids woke up one morning and their mother was gone. Later, I found out she emptied our accounts. His hands tightened around his coffee cup. How old were they? I asked softly. 7 and 9, he replied, his voice breaking. They still ask about her sometimes. Last month, my daughter saw her picture in some society magazine, smiling at some charity gala, while I'm working 2 jobs to give them a decent life. As I listened to Jack's story, my phone buzzed with a text from Carol, Melissa's former business partner. A trail of deception. Meeting Carol in her tiny apartment was eye-opening. She used to own a successful real estate firm, Sarah explained as we sat down. Until Melissa came along, Carol added, her tone bitter. I lost everything. She forged my signature on loans, transferred client funds. By the time I figured it out, she'd vanished with millions. How many others were there? I asked, taking notes. That I know of. 3 wealthy men before your father. She has a pattern. Find a successful older man, isolate him from his family, then take everything. Sarah and I compiled court records, victim statements, and financial documents. It was damning evidence, but we needed something bigger. Amy, what about her family? Sarah asked. The ones she's so desperate to fool? Found them, Sarah said, her eyes lighting up. Her brother's a partner at Matthews & Sons law firm. Very old money. Perfect, I said. Time for an anonymous package. We carefully assembled the evidence, adding Jack's contact information and Carol's statement. Sarah enlisted a private investigator to verify our findings. If Melissa's family hired someone, they'd uncover even more. A week later, my phone rang. Is this Amy? A deep voice asked. This is James Matthews, Melissa's brother. We need to talk. Looking at the envelope on my desk, ready to send to Melissa's family, I realized there was no turning back. Yes, Mr. Matthews, I said. I think we do need to talk. The engagement party at Leblink was in full swing when Jack walked in, holding the hands of 2 children.
The chatter of champagne glasses and classical music froze as a little girl's voice cut through the air. "Mommy," she called out. Melissa's face went ghost white. What are they doing here?" she stammered. "Miss Roberts," James Matthews said, stepping forward, his private investigator by his side. "Or should we call you Mrs. Thompson? Perhaps Mrs. Williams?" Dad turned to Melissa, confusion and horror dawning on his face. "Amy tried to warn me," he muttered. "I didn't listen." "Richard, they're lying." Melissa's voice cracked, her perfectly manicured hands trembling. "I can explain everything. Like you explained the millions you stole from me." Carol stepped out of the crowd, her voice sharp and unwavering. "Or why you abandoned your children," Jack added, his son clinging to his side. Chaos erupted. Melissa's family huddled together, whispering furiously, while Dad's business associates discreetly slipped away, phones buzzing with the scandal. "You're all jealous of what Richard and I have," Melissa screamed, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "What we had," Dad said quietly, his voice laced with finality. "It's over." Security escorted Melissa out as she hurled threats and accusations. Her son buried his face in Jack's jacket while her daughter silently watched, tears streaming down her face. Moving forward, 6 months later, I was grading papers in my classroom when Principal Howard knocked on the door. "Amy, got a minute?" he asked, smiling. "The board was impressed with how you handled everything while maintaining your professional integrity. We'd like to offer you the lead teacher position." That same day, Dad showed up at my new apartment. His face was weary, his eyes filled with regret. "Princess," he said softly. "Amy, I'm so sorry. I was a fool." Dad's voice cracked with regret as he stood in my doorway. "Yes, you were," I replied softly, my emotions a mix of sadness and exhaustion. "I miss you," he continued. "Can we try to?" "Dad, stop," I interrupted, meeting his gaze. "Melissa is facing fraud charges in 3 states. Her previous victims have come forward, and she's looking at serious jail time. You enabled her to almost destroy our relationship." "I know," he said, his shoulders slumping. "I'll do anything to make it right." "Then respect my boundaries," I replied firmly. "I need time." He nodded, leaving a small package on the table before he walked away. Inside was a newspaper clipping about my promotion and a note in his handwriting. "You were stronger than I ever was." Moving forward. A year later, I heard Melissa had taken a plea deal minus 15 years. Dad still sends monthly messages, but I respond only when I feel ready. My new position at school keeps me busy, and the respect I've earned feels better than any allowance ever could. Sarah visited my classroom last week, leaning against the doorframe with a smile. "Remember when this all started? Look at you now." I smiled back, watching my students file in. "Yeah, sometimes standing your ground costs you everything, but integrity pays better in the long run." The Matthews family even reached out, impressed by how I handled the situation, and offered me a tutoring position for their children. Life has a way of rewarding honesty, even when it feels like you're losing everything. My mother used to say, "Character is what you do when no one's watching." But I've learned it's also about what you refuse to do, even when everyone is pushing you to compromise. Reflection. Amy Adams might have lost her allowance, her comfortable lifestyle, and temporarily her relationship with her father. But she never lost herself. That's worth more than all the allowances in the world. The kids who now look up to me, the parents who trust me, and the colleagues who respect me remind me every day that choosing integrity over comfort was the right call. As for Dad, he's learning. Maybe someday we'll build something new, something based on truth this time. But for now, I'm exactly where I need to be. What about you? What would you do if your parent tried to blackmail you into lying? Would you choose financial security or your integrity? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Amy's story is a reminder that standing firm can come with great cost, but also great rewards. Was she right to stand her ground, or should she have played along to keep the peace and her financial security? The choice isn't always as clear as it seems when it's your own family asking you to compromise your values. If you want to hear more stories about standing up to toxic family members and coming out stronger, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support helps me share stories like Amy's, which might help others facing similar situations. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what you would do in this situation.